Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC 286, Edwards versus Usman 3. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. With me, as always, is Keith Schillen, the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. Keith, how are you doing today?
Doing good, man. How you doing?
I'm doing well. There was a little bit of a pause before you affirmed that you were doing okay. I think it's probably because you're looking ahead to a very busy fight week to the point of just almost intimidatingly packed. And on top of it, of course, is the NCAA wrestling tournaments going on.
So I get super excited for fights. Like I always try to remember back in the day when we'd get a UFC event every 3 months or something. So I'm not going to complain, but having two pay-per-views in the same month, 15 fights on this card. I mean, the UFC, what are they thinking? Like that, like asking fans to pay $75 twice in the same month, 2 weeks. That's a lot. They should have made this free.
Yeah, I'd be down with that, especially since it's in Europe. It's at a weird hour for the UFC. I completely agree. I mean, it's a lot. If I were just the average fan, I don't know if I'd be like, oh, yeah, I'm shelling out $160 this month for, UFC events. It's going to be more than like my phone bill and my car insurance put together to like watch what the UFC is going on. But
I try not to complain because I'm still going to enjoy watching fights.
Absolutely. Having said that, what's your general impression of this card going in? Like, what's your pre-event grade?
I give it a C. Obviously I'm scoring this. If I said, hey, I gave a fight night a B plus, I'm fighting on a scale.
Oh, if this were a free card, A plus. You've got
of course.
two of the top 15 pound for pound fighters in the planet at the top of the card.
I feel like it's very top heavy. Like the top two fights are really good. The rest of the card, there's some good prospects and things I'm excited about. But I mean, Brian Barberino on the main card, come on.
I'm with you there. And honestly, the sheer size of the undercard here and the quality of it, it makes it feel like a Bellator European undercard where they're going to jam as many Europeans in there as possible, regardless of name value. Got some debuting people that they're just going to get lost in the wash. I agree. Kind of like a Bellator undercard, the best we can hope for is that some of these are mismatches and we just get quick slaughter and can kind of move through these on the way to the meat at the top of the card.
This is going to be a long show, guys. We apologize. It's going to be a long one. It's 15 fights.
It's 15 fights, but we're going to try to come in under our current record, which is like 3 hours and 50 minutes or whatever. So let's jump right into these prelims if you don't mind. First up at UFC 286, at least as the card is currently constituted, is a women's flyweight matchup between Juliana Miller and Veronica Macedo. Miller, the 26-year-old Californian, is 3-1 in her mixed martial arts career. She is 1-0 since joining the UFC out of the 30th season of The Ultimate Fighter. She made her debut last August at UFC on ESPN Santos versus Hill, where she frankly kind of mauled Brogan Walker on the way to a late third round TKO on the ground. She will be looking to make it 2 in a row against the returning Macedo. The 27-year-old Venezuelan by way of Poland, by way of France, she's trained in Europe for a good while now, is 6-4-1 overall. She is 1-4 in the UFC. And she has not fought in almost exactly 3 years. Her last fight was back in March of 2020 at UFC Fight Night. Lee versus Oliveira. All you need to know about how long she's been gone is that the last time she fought in the UFC, it was a card headlined by Kevin Lee over Charles the Bronx Oliveira, where she dropped a unanimous decision to Bea Malecki in one of the most hilarious size mismatches ever seen in a UFC fight. Since then,
we might have one on this card too.
Yeah, we'll get to that one. But since then, she's been gone for 3 years, and for good reason. She had several fights canceled because she had lingering concussion symptoms. She officially retired, and she was trying to make one comeback like in 2020, and it was right around the time COVID started. And between that and her again, having trouble with concussion protocols, that was canceled. But it's been 3 years since we've seen her. In the meantime, she's married Dan Hardy, Here she's coming
Good for
back.
Dan Hardy.
Good for Dan Hardy.
She's a good-looking woman.
She is a good-looking woman. Dan Hardy is an outstanding analyst, but he is definitely marrying up in this case. So good on you. Good on you, Dan. Making out like an outlaw. Like the outlaw you are. At any rate, Macedo, I don't know how medically advisable it is. I'm mildly surprised to see her back, but here she is. And
I feel bad for that kid. You got mom with the bad head, dad with the bad heart. Oh, Jesus.
But she is definitely being brought along as, if not a full-on sacrificial lamb, at least a bit of a setup opponent for someone in Miller that the UFC clearly sees stars around her head, as Miller is minus 425 here, Macedo plus 300. Keith, when I said this felt like a Bellator Europe undercard, this was the kind of fight I'm talking about. Juliana Miller is definitely more prospect than finished product at this point, but she is a very good grappler. Not a whole lot of on the mat distinctions just because she crossed over to MMA fairly early, but she's shown good grappling on tough as well as in her few fights. She's a big, decently athletic flyweight, and she has star power. She has a little bit of that Ronda Rousey thing, and I'm not saying she's going to be Ronda Rousey, but where Ronda had the combination of being kind of big and smiley and effusive on the mic, but then just mean face in the cage to the other women, that's very much Juliana Miller's jam. And right now, if the UFC wants to bring her along and let that star power develop, they need to give her opponents that are going. I mean, it's almost like the way the UFC has to match Patty Pimblett. People who aren't going to punish her for her mistakes on the feet and are going to give her a ground fight if she needs it. And that's Veronica Macedo all around. I mean, she's 1-4 in the UFC. And in hindsight, her tapping out Poliana Viana in a minute is one of the most aberrant outcomes in UFC history, because she's had problems on the ground elsewhere. Against Ashley Evans Smith, she was going for Imanari rolls constantly and sliding for knee bars against a not very good fighter, and she ended up just getting mashed on the ground.
She tried doing it to Bay Malecki too.
Yes, tried doing it to Bay Malecki, and she survived just because Malecki isn't that good either. Yeah. But she got tapped out by Jaleel Robertson, which again, Robertson's just a better ground fighter than she is. This is tailor-made for Juliana Miller to shine. I mean, if Miller wants to come out with throwing wild haymakers and kicks and stuff like she often does, Macedo's not going to be able to punish her for that. And if things go adversely for Macedo, her instinct is to try desperately to bring it to the ground, which plays right into Miller's territory as a bigger, better grappler. I think this is a super, super squash match. I don't know if Macedo is back for good. I mean, she still is only 27, so if she's got a clean bill of health, I don't know, where she goes from 1-5 in the UFC, but I think she's going to be 1-5 in the UFC at the end of the day on Saturday. Give me Miller by second round submission, though she could get a TKO on the ground as well.
This is an interesting. I'm surprised this is the first fight of the night. Being that Miller just won the Ultimate Fighter. Miller's a high volume striker. I actually think I like her striking better than you talked it up. I think she's got a nice jab. She will eat a shot to land one of her own, which obviously is not good for the long term. But she's got a strong chin, strong Muay Thai clinch game. She gets in there, and she can work. Though she did get a little bit muscled against Clara Guthrie, who I actually think is actually a pretty good fighter herself. But she likes to battle in the clinch. She got some pretty good pummeling skills. She hit a nice foot sweep on the Ultimate Fighter finale. She's a BJJ practitioner, good top game, hard ground and pound, good back takes. She can ride a little too high and lose position, I don't like, but she's hit some beautiful submissions on the Ultimate Fighter. If she's taken down, she attacks with subs off her back, or she likes to throw elbows or something. She was landing some mean elbows. I also like that she can, she knows when there's an opening to work back to her feet, and she can fight hard all 15 minutes, and she is a submission threat. Macedo, she's 27, like you said, 3 years off. I like that she's moving back down to 125. She moves well on the feet, kind of have a get in, get out style, some fast hands, mixes kicks and combos well. Throws kind of wild, though. A lot of looping outside shots, almost overthrows her shots. She keeps throwing out like spinning attacks for no reason. She has this Taekwondo background, so she likes to throw Holly Holm side kicks. But the worst thing I saw in her last fight against Babe Maleki, besides the size difference, is how badly she gassed out. She gassed out about one round of action. She's a weak defensive wrestler. She struggles to get up on bottom. I mean, yeah, she did hit that beautiful armbar against Polyana Viana, but I think it's more like, you hit the jackpot every once in a while when you put in a coin. It just happens. Macedo probably has the power advantage, but I like Miller everywhere else. I think she gets some flurries on the feet. I think she hits a takedown or two, beats her up on the ground, and eventually gets a submission. So I'll take Miller by second round submission. But it's funny that you talked about her dealing with a concussion. I actually, all right, here you go. I'll give you one. I've all 55. I'll give you one story time, Keith. I actually worked a science fair. I was security for a science fair today. It was all about the brain. And there was doctors and scientists, and I was definitely the dumbest person in the entire building. But there was like actual brains. You could pick up a brain. Like they had like people who donated their brain after they died. And there was a robot. They had one of those things where a guy was missing an arm, and he put the arm in, his brain could make the arm move. And it was really, really fascinating. But I actually talked to somebody that had like a whole booth on brain injuries, and we talked about concussions and MMA and how dangerous it is. So yeah. Guess I'm an expert on the topic now, so it makes me more feeling good for Miller.
So you told that guy he should check out Power Slap, right?
Yeah. It was actually a woman. Way to be sexist there to think that a woman can't be a scientist.
A woman can absolutely be a scientist. I don't think any women like MMA, so I'm surprised that they talk to you about MMA. Like only guys like MMA.
Well, it was more like,
hey, if you're listening to this, Ben said that, not Keith. Like, oh. Dude, how raw is your town that a science fair needs like cops? Are people throwing down in the parking lot outside the science fair?
That they did a science fair in Pawtucket, and dude, you wouldn't believe there were like the two head scientists of this. The one was a university. They had people from Harvard. It was big time. But they had a Brown University professor, and they had Roger Williams, which actually I graduated from. Yeah, and they were like, there was a whole bunch of professors. Those are the two ones who were in charge and put it on, and they both were young ladies, and they both were absolute dime pieces.
Wow. Like
absolutely, like the one from Roger Williams. I literally said to her, like right in front of you, I'm like, "You're a professor?" And she's like, "Yeah." And I go, she was smoking hot. I just said, "Fuck it." I was feeling good. I was like, dude, I never had any professors like you when I was there. I'm like, I would have studied a lot more. And she like laughed, like she was cool.
Next up on the UFC 286 undercard is a lightweight matchup between Jai Herbert and Ludovit Klein. Herbert, the 34-year-old Brit, is 12-4 overall. He is 2-3 since joining the UFC as the outgoing Cage Warriors lightweight champ. He fought most recently in July at the second UFC London card of last year, where he took a unanimous decision over Kyle Nelson. That allowed him to get back on track from a pretty rough knockout loss to Ilia Topuria last March at the first UFC London card of 2022. He'll look to make it 2 wins in a row, bring his UFC record to 500 against Klein. The 28-year-old Slovak is 19-4 overall. He's 3-2 in the UFC. He is coming into this fight off of back-to-back wins. He won twice last year over Devontae Smith at UFC 272 in March, where he picked up a split decision, then picked up a well-deserved unanimous decision over Mason Jones in July at that same UFC London 2 card. Coming into this fight, Klein is the slight favorite. He's minus 170, Herbert plus 135. Keith, lightweight is a super crowded, super competitive division. Even if a couple of other UFC divisions have kind of caught up to it. But, you can do a lot and still be just kind of hovering around 500 in the UFC because there really aren't many easy outings. Who takes a step forward here and who takes a step back towards obscurity?
Yeah, this is a tough matchup. This is I like both of these guys. Herbert, he's a really good athlete. He moves well. He likes to fight from distance. Good jab, throws straight shots down the pipe. I like when he's inside, he mixes it in like slicing elbows. He's got power in both hands. When he dropped Francisco Trinaldo, he knocked out Worthy. He needs to learn to check leg kicks. I mean, his last fight against Kyle Nelson had a lot of success against him with leg kicks. We think about him as a striker, but he's a really underrated wrestler. He had some good slick back takes. He uses his long legs to body triangle, which I like. He's a weak defensive wrestler. I mean, I go back to like the Moicano fight where Moicano took him down easily, but that's also like a big step up in competition. And we do have to worry about his chin a little bit. I mean, he was knocked dead by Topuria. Klein, he's also a southpaw. Actually, well, Herbert switches. I'm sorry, but Klein definitely is more southpaw. Very athletic, moves well, technically sound, fast hands, uses feints really well. Crisp jab. I love his fade back left hand. It's really beautiful. I'd say a plus power guy. He gets really good power because of his foot placements. He's always winning the foot battle. He dropped Mason Jones with like a little short shot. He can land kicks everywhere, strong calf kicks, hard body kicks, crushing high kick. He's inconsistent on the ground, though. Like, he looked terrible against Mike Trezano on the ground. And then he showed good defensive wrestling skills against Devontae Smith, against Mason Jones, two guys that I like better than Trezano. So I like both guys. If I'm Herbert, I'm trying to get this fight to the ground. But I don't know if he's going to be able to. And Klein he's grown on me. I think he stuffed some takedowns. I think he's worked on his ground game too. I think we've seen that in his recently. If he lets his hands go, he's really sharp. I think he'll have some success with the calf kicks. Give me Klein by decision.
Yeah, I like your breakdown of their skills a lot. What I found encouraging about Klein's win over Jones is through his first 4 or 5 UFC fights, win or lose, he still had that feeling of somebody who had gotten by on the regional level just by being skilled and athletic and being able to wipe people out with head kicks. And he had great individual skills, but oftentimes didn't seem to have a better idea than throwing some kicks and kind of waiting to see if he could take his guy out with a single shot. And ultimately in the UFC 145 or 155 pound division, that's just not going to carry you very far unless you're Brian Ortega. But kind of like Brian Ortega, Klein against Jones, he seemed to have more ideas. He was a little more persistent when things didn't go his way, threw more volume, and he looked like a round winner all of a sudden. And, like if you can be a guy who can win rounds and be looking for the instant finish, that makes you really dangerous. Because of that, I'm leaning towards him as well because Herbert, like you said, like he's been TKO'd and he's been just like flat out one-shotted in the UFC in his last couple of fights. And that's something that Klein could absolutely do to him. If Herbert leans on his offensive wrestling, I think he can probably, control Klein for 2 rounds out of 3, win a really close decision. But I think it's more likely that Klein, if he doesn't get the finish, at least hurts him bad in 1 round, kind of changes the course of the fight and takes control. So I'm going with Klein by decision as well. But if we get a spectacular finish by him, I won't be too surprised. We head back now to the women's flyweight division for a matchup between Joanne Wood and Luana Carolina. Wood, the 37-year-old Scot by way of Las Vegas, is 15-8 overall. She is 7-8 since joining the UFC out of the 20th season of The Ultimate Fighter. She is currently riding a 3-fight losing streak, those being a split decision loss to Lauren Murphy back in June of 2021, a first-round submission loss to Tyler Santos in November of 2021, and almost exactly a year ago at the first UFC London card of last year, another first-round submission loss, this time to Alexa Grasso. She will attempt to get back or get out of this hole against Carolina. The 29-year-old Brazilian is 8-3 overall. She's 3-2 since joining the UFC out of the first season of Dana White's Contender Series Brazil. She lost her last time out. It was at UFC London 1 of last year in March, where she was finished by your knockout of the year, or knockout of the year contender, the spinning back elbow by Molly McCann. Prior to that, she had been on a 2-fight winning streak over Poliana Botelho and Lupita Godinez. So she will also be looking to get back into the win column. She is not favored to do so. Wood, minus 190, Carolina plus 155. Keith, I got to admit, when I saw that Joanne Wood was on this card, I was like, oh, did she come out of retirement? And then I realized that she had not retired. I assumed after her third straight loss that she had kind of quietly retired, and she never did. On the one hand, Wood has lost 3 in a row. She's lost 5 of her last 7, but the people she's lost to are literally Valentina Shevchenko's last 5 title challengers: Alexa Grasso, Tyler Santos, Lauren Murphy, Jennifer Maia, Caitlin Chikagian.
Yeah, that's a good crew.
I mean,
yeah,
she is what she is. But here, this looks and feels like the UFC trying to get the UK fighter a winnable fight in the UK. She is almost a 2-1 favorite, but is this the fight where Joanne Wood reminds us that, hey, I'm a good fighter, I'm just not top 5, or is this where the UFC is going to have a rough decision, like, do we cut this woman loose?
Yeah, you know the most surprising, even more than Joanne Wood still fighting, is did you say Carolina has a 3-2 record in the UFC?
Yep.
If you gave if you gave me a guess that she had a winning record, I would have guessed she was like 4 fights under 500. But yeah, wow,
yeah,
that's surprising.
She's 3-2. Well, it's because her losses were so spectacular. Like, they each feel like 5 losses. Like, getting knee barred by Ariane Lipski and getting iced by Molly McCann.
Yeah,
are just they stick out, man. They're bad
losses. You said once about Derek Brunson, like, he loses badly, but he doesn't have a bad loss. No, yeah. Those are both. Those are like, yeah, those are bad losses, and they lost in a bad way. Joanne Wood, it's really hard to trust her. I mean, you made a joke about her, not being retired or everything. She's 37 years old, and she's so much older than I think she is. Mm-hmm. Maybe because she has like a 8-year-old girl voice when she talks, but I don't expect her at 37 to suddenly improve. She's a Muay Thai striker. She's got some high output. She works behind a jab. She's always lacked power, though. If punching power, she gets to the plum clinch, she can battle in there. She will actually look for a takedown every once in a while, but she's definitely not a wrestler by any means. Throws a lot of kicks. That's the best part of her games. Calf kicks, tons of teep kicks. That's like her go-to, what she's most known for. We'll turn it on the side for a body kick, to the ribs, and a high kick. But she has a lot of defensive holes. She stands up really tall. She pulls her head straight back. Her defensive wrestling is really bad. I mean, like, I go back to Andrew Lee took her down 3 times. Alexa Grasso took her down 2 times. She has a bunch of other fighters who took her down at least once. She also struggles to get back up. And she's, I talk about teep kicks being the strength of her game. Her Achilles heel is her submission defense. I mean, she's been subbed by everybody. Maia, Andrade, Morose, Santos, Rose Namajunas, like, everybody subs her.
Yep. Now,
Carolina, she's long and lengthy. She uses her length to work from the outside. She's also like a very Muay Thai style fighter. Straight punches down the pipe, long jab. A lot of those like Volkov, like tall man throwing the teep kicks down the middle to keep your distance. More like pushing them back. She has some hard leg kicks. She's good in the plum clinch, where she can kind of use her height to get a hold of someone and kind of grab that back of the neck and clinch on and blast knees inside. But she is a terrible, terrible defensive wrestler. And we've seen that. Other than like Lupi Godinez, like, being up to her knees in height, like everybody else is, if you're close to her size, like Joanne Wood, you probably could out wrestle her. Well, then she got knocked out cold by a spinning back fist by Molly McCann. So, I'm always worried when someone returns from a knockout, like how their chin's going to be. This is kind of the style matchup that both fighters would probably prefer. They both like to work a distance kickboxing match. They like to clinch fight. I could see Wood going for some takedowns, because as she does want a outside kickboxing match, I don't know if she wants to go against someone as big as Carolina, who's, it would be the smartest route for Wood. But I'm going to go the opposite way, man. I'm going to go with a size difference. I'm going to pick Carolina in an upset. I say the teep kicks bother Wood. I say she lands the hardest shots. I say that she uses her size to maybe stop some takedowns. And God, I hope she's improved a little bit on her takedown defense. I'll say Carolina by split decision.
Yeah, you stole my thunder. There are a lot of things at play here. Obviously, I had no justification for believing that Joanne Wood had retired, or assuming somewhere in the back of my mind. But the reasons I probably thought that were, they all stand and are still valid. She's on a 3-fight losing streak, even if it's against very good fighters. She is 37. Her own path back to a title shot is it's so long and winding that at 37, you almost have to throw your hands up. We talk about, on Sean Shelby's phone, like how many names do you have to scroll through? Even if you are even if your entry is on his speed dial alongside John Wood, like the head of Syndicate MMA, you're like, he's not even getting to his name. Like
Joanne might be just got deleted from the phone. Like she might not be in there.
Yeah. Sean Shelby might get to like John Wood's name first and be like, can you get Roxanne Modafferi to unretire? I've called 35 people. Like I think it's valid to question her motivation a year removed from her second first-round submission loss in a row. If she is motivated, Carolina is a huge step down in competition from those women. But my gut says that Wood will be the same fighter as she was a year ago, or maybe a little worse version, where Carolina might still be a better fighter than she was a year ago. And I would have considered this fight more or less a push a year ago. I'm with you. Both of these women have some porous takedown defense. It would be interesting if Wood decided to turn this into a wrestling match, but give me Carolina to win a striking battle at distance, maybe mixed with some ugly groundwork. And again, that'll be 4 in a row for Ms. JoJo.
She's not retired, but like they own a gym, and it's a very successful gym.
Yeah,
like just let John teach the classes and be the head coach, and she could like it'd be like a little kitchen area where she's making protein balls, little protein balls for the fighters. She could make some of those, or she could like with a kid's class. The mom brings in the kid for the kid class, and she could come in being all sweet and then give him a little tour.
She could teach kickboxing there. We don't have to throw her straight into the kitchen just because she lost a few fights in the UFC.
I was trying to match your sexism. You already went sexist. I'm going the other way.
We could be sexist and bigoted. Maybe she can make some haggis or something, because she's.
What the hell is haggis?
It's the Scottish national dish. It's like this disgusting, like sheep stomach, like stuffed with all its internal organs and stuff. Next up, the men's flyweights take the cage as it is Jake Hadley versus Malcolm Gordon. Hadley, the 26-year-old Birmingham native, is 9-1 overall. He's 1-1 since joining the UFC out of the 2021 season of Dana White's Contender Series and as a former Cage Warriors flyweight champ. He dropped his UFC debut to Alan Nascimento by decision last May, came back in November, and triangled Carlos Candelario in the second round. He will look to make it 2 in a row against Gordon. The 32-year-old Ontario native is 14-6 overall. He is 2-3 since joining the UFC as a former TKO flyweight champ up in his native Canada. He lost his last time out. It was at UFC 280, where he got armbarred in the third round by super prospect Muhammad Mokaev, who appears a little further up this card. Prior to that, he had won back-to-back fights over Francisco Figueiredo and Denise Bondar. Odds here do heavily favor the Brit. Hadley is minus 360, Gordon plus 240 on the comeback. Keith, how high were you on Hadley as a prospect coming into the UFC, and how do you feel about him now?
Yeah, I would have put him at like a B. Like I wasn't, he definitely showed some promise. I wasn't calling him, this huge superstar like Mokaev or something like that. But yeah, I think he looked like a good prospect, and he's looked better each fight. Like the Nascimento fight, he made some mistakes. He kind of adjusted to that in his last fight. So I definitely feel higher on him now than I did coming into the UFC. So that's good. Hadley, he's a southpaw that he uses pressure so well. his last fight, he fought at an insane pace, constantly taking the ground, constantly cutting off the cage, trapping his opponents at times. Very tight, clean boxing, stiff jab, great variety in his strikes, constantly mixing it up. Body work was a real big thing for him, which I love. He does have this weird like pillaring thing where he kind of keeps his right arm across his body. But that can keep his opponents from, when they punch, he can catch his elbow and actually break their hand. The negative part of it, he does leave his body open to get countered. He does back up straight up on the center line sometimes, which I don't like. But going back to some of the positive, his kicks really impressed me. He really turns his hips over, especially when he's like ripping to the body with a kick. He can wrestle. He's got some strong top game, looks to advance position on the ground. I would say he's a weaker defensive wrestler, and that's because of his very aggressive style. It kind of walks him into entries, but he hits the ground. He's doing his yoga. He's doing his yoga with Adrian, Shout out to her. Not that I do my yoga, but flexible. I'm just trying to put that so we can put that in the notes and get some more clicks. Good subs offer back, chain submissions together well. He hit Mitch Raposa with a Gogo Plata, which that's a New England fighter, so take that what it's worth. He does struggle to get off the bottom. He was pinned to the canvas against Alan Nascimento, but his last fight that wasn't the case at all. Now Malcolm Gordon, I'd say he's a good athlete. He also fights a lot of pressure, very aggressive on the feet, fast hands, plus power. He has taken a lot of damage though. Like he's not that old, or not like he doesn't have like a gazillion fights, but he seems like he's more of a veteran than as long as he's been around. Like he's been tagged a little bit. He can wrestle. It isn't anything special there. If he gets the fight to the canvas, it's leaves something, he trips him down. He doesn't really explode through. He kind of has a grinding mindset where he is committed to get it there. He's a submissions rat. He's got 6 subs. He usually wins by just outworking his foe and finding a submission and an opening. But he's a weak defensive wrestler. As far as prediction, Gordon's actually a tough test. Gordon's a gamer. Like he's a bit of an overachiever in that like Gerald Mershad type guy where, the things he doesn't jump out to you, but suddenly he's still in the fight, deep into the fight. He gave Mokaev, he got beat up, but he had moments against Mokaev. He kind of puts him in the position to win. I expect him to try to wrestle a lot, but I'm still leaning Hadley here. He's the better overall fighter. He's definitely the better athlete. I shouldn't say definitely the better athlete, but he has more weapons, I should say. I like his volume to get Gordon to eventually tag him up and maybe even get a stoppage. I'll say Hadley gets him in the 3rd round. I'll say he gets a submission.
Yeah, I'm with you here. I like Hadley's improvement from fight to fight. I think Gordon, for the reasons you mentioned, probably is what he is. He is a 20-fight veteran at this point who's been fighting at a pretty high level across the top end of TKO and in the UFC for several years now. He does overachieve a bit, but I don't expect him to make any huge leaps in performance or in skill set at this point in his career. And in fact, it's probably due to start dropping off eventually. He's a 32-year-old flyweight that, as you mentioned, has gotten dinged up in a good number of his fights, whereas Hadley is improving and probably will continue to for a while now. Gordon overperformed against Mokaev because he came in as a gigantic underdog to Mokaev. Hadley doesn't have quite the same prospect shine, but for all I know, Hadley will turn into just as good a flyweight in the UFC eventually. Give me Hadley in a pretty dominant decision here as well. Next up at UFC 286, it is the middleweights, as Christian Leroy Duncan joins the UFC and faces Dusko Todorovic. Duncan, and it's going to get confusing because we have a Christian Duncan and a Chris Duncan on this card, and they're both debuting, and they're both British. Just bear with us. We'll keep them separated as best we can. Christian Leroy Duncan, the 27-year-old Englishman, is a perfect 7-0 in his mixed martial arts career. This will be his debut. He is joining as the outgoing Cage Warriors middleweight champ. He fought most recently back in November, knocking out Marian Dimitrov late in the 1st round to defend his title. He'll be greeted in the octagon by Todorovic. The 28-year-old Serbian is 12-3 overall. He is 3-3 since joining the UFC out of the third season of Dana White's Contender Series. He won his last time out. It was a second round TKO of Jordan Wright at UFC Fight Night Grasso versus Araujo back in October. Prior to that, he had gotten knocked out late in the first round by Chidi Njokuani. So he'll be looking to make it 2 in a row. Duncan will be looking to keep his record perfect. Odds slightly favor the Brit. He is minus 180, Todorovic plus 150. I'm as excited for Christian Duncan to join the UFC as any of the debuting people on this card. He is a lot of fun to watch. It'll remain to be seen whether it stays fun when he faces UFC level middleweights, but he was fighting pretty decent competition in Cage Warriors. And, he's an orthodox kickboxer who throws lots of kicks, hard kicks, loves his flying, spinning stuff. But, what I want to see out of anybody that's a highlight reel kickboxer on the regional scene is how they deal with wrestlers. And he deals with them pretty well. I mean, he has a pretty basic sprawl and underhooks, like kind of Crow Cop style, to get 2 underhooks and shove his man off, that has worked so far because he's a big guy, he's strong, he's athletic, so he's good at getting his hips out of the way. And he has that thing that I've talked about on our show for years, where half of takedown defense is making the other guy pay for trying. And then Laura Sanko knocked it out of the park a couple weeks ago in her desk debut, where she just said, you have to advertise the price of admission. I like that. Christian Duncan knows you want to take him down, and he advertises the price of admission. He greets shots with flying knees. When people try to, get a single or a double against the fence, he's throwing the Travis Brown elbows or throwing hammer fists and just making it miserable to try and take him down. I like all those things. Now, in this particular fight, I doubt Todorovic is going to try to take him down. Todorovic comes from a kickboxing background himself. He clearly fancies himself a kickboxer, and he's been a pretty good one at the UFC level. I mean, he's 3-3, but other big hitters have crushed him. Chidi Njokuani leveled him. Puna Soriano leveled him. He finished Jordan Wright, but I think Christian Duncan is probably already a better fighter than Jordan Wright. I'm always a little nervous picking a 7-0, 27-year-old striking specialist coming in against a more veteran fighter who will be at least his own same size. But I like Duncan as a prospect, and I'm going to ride this train until it pops off the rails. Give me Duncan by second round TKO, and I'm predicting that he's probably going to punish Todorovic into trying for takedowns before it's over.
Todorovic, he's a guy, I've said this before, he was a guy that I really liked coming off the Contender Series, and I think I just read him wrong. I don't think he's as good as I thought he was going to be. I'm kind of giving up on him. He's a southpaw. He can wrestle and strike. He's well-rounded in the sense, he shows a little bit of both. You're much higher on his striking than I am, because he just has major defensive holes. He can't stop a left hook. Offensively, he works behind a jab. He does work the body, which I like. Definitely a plus power guy. He relies on slipping and ripping, which is an issue considering he keeps his chin high in the air. And you mentioned it, Chidi and Njokuani crushed him for it. Puna Soriano crushed him for it. He's a big guy. That's the thing that stands out. He can get in the clinch and grind in there and wear on him, especially if he initiates the clinch in the offense. He's a good wrestler, some inside trips, some throws. But I was surprised that he couldn't stop takedowns from Jordan Wright, and he was easily taken down, and he was mounted by Jordan Wright, which is obviously really disturbing. If he gets on top, he can control and hold down. He does work to a better submission position. He has some submissions on his record, which I like. Now, Christian Leroy Duncan, he's also a big guy for the weight class. He's extremely athletic, moves really well, can fight out of both stances, constantly changing the stances too. Feints well, he's fast, good power, does unnecessary spinning attacks. He did one his last fight. We did this jumping wheel roundhouse kick that I was like, what the hell was that? Does does some spinning back fist. He likes to work from distance. He does really well to hand fight and kind of get to his range and get to it pretty quick because of that hand fighting. He hates being pressured though. He also does, for a good kickboxer, stands a little too tall for my liking, but he throws a lot of kicks. I like his teep kicks. I agree with this. From what I've seen, his takedown defense has been strong. He does have a submission on his record, but I haven't seen too much of him on the canvas, so I don't have a lot of confidence there. I've given up on Todorovic. He has just too many defensive holes. I don't think he's that guy. And Duncan is too fast. I think he hits too hard. I say he lands a big shot early, and I think he gives the crowd, this British crowd, exactly what they want. I think he knocks him out in the very first round. Give me Leroy Duncan by first round TKO.
All right. 2 strong picks for Duncan to wow the crowd and keep his undefeated record undefeated. Our next bout at UFC 286 takes place in the men's featherweight division, where Lerone Murphy will welcome Gabriel Santos to the UFC. Murphy, the 31-year-old Englishman, is 11-0-1 overall. He's 3-0-1 in the UFC after fighting to a strange split draw with Zubaira Tukhugov in his debut back in September of 2019. He's rattled off 3 wins in a row over Ricardo Ramos, Douglas Silva de Andrade, and Makwan Amirkhani. The most recent of those, the Amirkhani fight, was a second round, kind of flying knee or step-in knee knockout. That's the good news. The bad news is that was over a year and a half ago. It was back in October of 2021. So returning from a fairly lengthy layoff is Murphy. He had been scheduled to take on Nathaniel Wood, but Wood a couple of weeks ago gashed his knee horribly training. Like, he was rolling on the mats, and there's apparently some wood molding, ironically, that he skidded across, and the picture circulated on social media, but it looked like he had major surgery. Like, he had a horizontal cut across his patella that had like 13 big stitches in it. It looked like he'd had some sort of surgery that was going to keep him out for the rest of the year, but it was just a cut. At any rate, Wood is out. In comes Santos, fresh off of winning the LFA Featherweight Grand Prix. 26-year-old Brazilian is a perfect 10-0 in his mixed martial arts career. He fought most recently at LFA 151 back in January, where he put away Jose Delano in the 3rd round with a body punch. He steps in, and he's actually not too much of an underdog here. Murphy comes in at minus 175, Santos plus 145. Keith, I feel like Lerone Murphy is really, really good, but I can't prove it. Tell me whether I'm wrong or right.
Yeah. I think he's good too. I hope Nathaniel Wood gets better. I just imagine some old man somewhere saying like, "Oh, back in my day, we would have fought with that." This new generation.
My thing is, how can you have a major gym with that kind of hazard just out there?
I don't know. Get Joanne Wood to get on top of that. Get some rugs over there. Something. Yeah. Oh,
she's good. The interior decorator of like MMA gyms.
Murphy. He hasn't been very active, so it's hard to really get excited about the guy. But when he has fought, he's a elusive fighter. He moves well. He can fight out of both stances. He's a good technical striker. Sets up his attacks really well with feints. A little bit of boxing, shoulder rolls things going on. To avoid shots. He fights behind a jab. He'll actually double it up, which I like. He's accurate. He can overthrow his power shots a little bit, leaving it open to counters, which is something I think he needs to clean up. I like that he goes to the body. That's a big part of his game. Like, he'll step in and throw some hard hooks. Good kicks, hard kicks to the body, calf kicks. He will wrestle a little. He doesn't have a submission on his record, but he did almost catch Tukhugov in the guillotine. I mean, that was a while ago. If he's on top, he's got some mean ground and pound. I mean, he knocked out Ricardo Ramos with ground and pound. He needs to improve his takedown defense a little bit, though. And he couldn't get off the bottom against Tukhugov. Early on against Amirkhani, he couldn't get up, which was an issue. But I love how he made an adjustment. He was extremely intelligent in that Amirkhani fight where he knew Amirkhani was looking for takedowns, so he feinted a punch and then threw a knee and timed it perfect and knocked out Amirkhani. That was something, honestly, that's something Patterson should have did in his fight against Merab Dvalishvili.
Well, he only had 22 or 23 chances. So
well, he only had 49 chances.
Yeah.
He did gas out a little bit in the Amirkhani fight. So that's one thing I don't like. Now Santos, he's a stalking kind of opponent. He constantly switching stances, a little bit unorthodox, a little bit herky-jerky style. But he's got good volume, high volume. He's a counter striker where he likes to like slip in the counter with his strong left hand. A lot of good straight shots. I also like that he's another guy that works the body. I mean, his last fight he finished with a body shot. A lot of kicks, though he does throw him naked, and he's going to get blasted by someone because of that. He's a builder. As the fight goes on, his volume continues to rise. We saw that especially in his last fight where he was getting stronger and stronger as his opponent started to fade away. He will shoot for takedowns, but he's not a wrestler. He's one of these guys. He reaches for takedowns, and he shoots with his head down, which kind of, once you get sprawled and, forces you underneath and down, where he's kind of shooting down instead of into the man's hips. But he's a submission. He's got a lot of submissions on his record. I'll say this about this fight. The deeper the fight goes, the more I like Santos, especially if he can get some takedowns early and make Murphy work. But Murphy's good on his feet. I think he lands some good shots as Santos is marching forward. I'm with you. I think Murphy's good. I think Murphy catches Santos early. I'm going to say Murphy wins by first round knockout.
Yeah, I was looking for kind of upset value here or routes to victory for Santos, and to me, I'm exactly with you. They all kind of hang on this fight being competitive going into the third round. Well, hang on the fight making it to the third round and still being competitive at that point. Murphy is running out of time to make a serious run at featherweight. I mean, he's been gone for, again, a year and a half. And even before that, he was kind of a once-a-year fighter at best. 31-year-old. Like, I had hoped he would have done more by now. But anytime he's out there, I still like him against most fighters outside the top 15 at 145. He has a lot of offensive tools. And I do think he's going to be too much for Santos here, even if Santos, as the younger guy, has more eventual upside. Unless Murphy's seriously declined, I'm with you. I think he punishes Santos on the feet. And if Santos decides to go for a desperation takedown or a calculated takedown, Murphy has absolutely, at this point, advertised the price of admission to his hips. Just ask Amirkhani. So give me Murphy by first round knockout as well. Next up on the UFC 286 prelims is another men's flyweight matchup. This one featuring Muhammad Mokaev versus Jafel Filho. Mokaev, the 22-year-old Dagestani by way of Manchester, England, who will be fervently and enthusiastically and loudly greeted as a native son when he walks out to the cage, is 9-0 with one no contest in his mixed martial arts career. He is 3-0 since joining the UFC as a standout from Brave Combat Federation. He fought most recently at UFC 280 last October, where he knee-barred Malcolm Gordon in the third round with actually just like 30 seconds left on the clock to keep his record spotless. He will look to make it 4 in a row in the UFC and will look to mint himself as one of the promotion's brightest rising stars against Filho. The 29-year-old Brazilian is 14-2 overall. While this will be his UFC debut, he fought on the Contender Series last September, where he knocked out Herbert in the first round, and he is also a longtime veteran of Judo Brazil, though he never did quite make it to the title. Odds here are as wide as you will find on this card, as Mokaev is a whopping minus 800 favorite, Filho plus 500 on the comeback. Keith, it scares me that they keep rolling out this 21, 22-year-old kid as like minus 800, minus 900 favorites, because even though Mokaev is one of the new breed of fighters that by the time he turns pro has a long amateur history and has been training in MMA, from his teens, that's still a really young guy that's prone to make a mistake and run into the kind of opponent who can make him pay for it. And so going into this and kind of rewatching Mokaev, getting more familiar with Filho, my thought was, okay, what are some of the mistakes Mokaev makes, and are they things that Filho has, shown himself to be capable of taking advantage of or punishing him for? And I actually think Filho's pretty good, but I don't see it. And part of the problem is that Filho does more silly stuff that isn't going to fly in the UFC than Mokaev like ever has. A perfect case in point is on the Contender Series. You know, he won, it punched his ticket to the UFC, but butt scooting is not going to work for you at the UFC level. You're going to need to check leg kicks better than that. Like, we're talking about a fighter who, even though he won, had to be carried from the cage because like his leg had been wrecked by leg kicks. Filho, I mean, he's an athletic guy. He's aggressive. He's a whole hell of a lot of fun to watch. But Mokaev is going to punish this dude. Mokaev, he's gotten a submission in the UFC. He hasn't had any knockouts in a while. Give me Mokaev to drop Filho in the first round and probably have to dive in and like finish him on the ground. So give me Mokaev by TKO ground and pound in the first round. But Mokaev is going to like make me look silly for questioning the 8-1 odds here.
Yeah, I mean, Mokaev, I mean, he really is an elite prospect. When we talked about Hadley before being, you know, a prospect, I give a B. I mean, Mokaev's like he's right up there. He's an A prospect. He's a true blue chip guy. He's one of the more dazzling pure athletes in the UFC right now. Well, he's one of the guys when I think about people and we predict guys that could win UFC titles, and I always like to put that like thing out there when we say something really good, like he could be a champion one day, but it's one of those like, yeah, I'm not picking that. Like I try to say like, oh, he could be a top 15 guy, and that's really impressive. You're saying there's 15 guys in the world that he's. Oh, I shouldn't say world because obviously outside UFC, but you get my point. Like, yeah, all right, fine, top 25 guys in the entire world. Mokaev is one of those guys where I will say like he could be a UFC champion. Like he's that the ceiling's that high for him. He's a high volume striker who's very technically sound. Everything comes off of feints where he can draw something out, then he counters, very fast hands, slip and writ style. I love that he just slips just out of range so he can tag his foes with his own counters. I love that he targets the body. He can get in the pocket and he can really crack. I mean, you go back to, well, you know what? And he's extremely athletic. Like, go to like the Cody Durden fight where he hits his flying knee. Great wrestler. He's one of these guys that he can explode right through your hips on his entries, take it down. I mean, we've seen him hit suplexes so far in the UFC. He does need to control his top and slow down a little bit when he's on the ground. He rushes submissions, and we saw that against Malcolm Gordon. I think some of that might be he has so much confidence that I don't know if he looks past guys, but he just expects to be able to do these things to guys, which it can be a really good thing, but you know, it gets him in bad positions sometimes. He has a submission threat. He has 5 subs on his record. And despite getting – this is going to sound really, like, ironic. I actually thought he was slowing down a little bit against Malcolm Gordon, which is surprising despite getting a third-round submission. Filho feints well. Tends to be a little bit of a low output guy, but when he does attack, like he kind of waits, but when he does attack, he throws combinations, mixes in like high and low attacks, goes to the head, goes to the body. He throws naked leg kicks, which I don't like. He's also open to leg kicks. Like he was getting kicked a lot in his last fight. He likes to grind in the clinch. He will look for a takedown, but he definitely isn't a wrestler. More of like a get in there, body lock, grind on you. He kept doing like a slide by from the clinch and trying to like get to the back. And he backpacked a couple times. He's got 8 submission wins and some slick back takes. That's his route to victory. Like get a scramble going, maybe catch a submission, but man, I think Mokaev is going to clown on him. I say Mokaev bad ups on the feet. I think Mokaev he seems like he has a little bit of John Jones in him where he wants to go into where you're supposed to be great at, where I think he could go in for takedown and he dogs him from on top, ground and pounds him. I say Mokaev gets a second round TKO from ground and pound.
All right. 2 picks for Muhammad Mokaev to keep the, at least thus far, very well justified hype train rolling. The UFC London prelims soldier on with a lightweight matchup between 2 debuting fighters. It is Sam Patterson versus Yanal Ashmoz. Patterson, the 26-year-old Englishman, is 10-1-1 overall. He fought most recently on the Contender Series back in September, where he choked out Vinicius Sensi in the second round, earning him a spot in the UFC. Meanwhile, Ashmoz, the 27-year-old Israeli, is a perfect 6-0 overall. He fought most recently almost exactly a year ago, and it was actually in that other prospect show. It was PFL Challenger Series, where he took a unanimous decision over Dennis Hughes. He either was not offered a PFL contract, maybe they're just looking for killers over there, or either that or declined one. But in either event, it's been a year, and here he is in the UFC. Odds here heavily favor the towering Englishman, as Patterson is minus 270, Ashmoz plus 210. Keith, Sam Patterson cuts a rare figure. I don't know if this is the fight you were talking about, where there was going to be a noticeable height difference.
Yeah. He's 6'4".
He's a 6'4" lightweight. And I mean, once upon a time, 6'4" lightweight meant Corey Hill. Like, do you have enough calcium in your bones to fight
how
at this
tall
weight?
was James Vick?
James Vick was like he was only like 6'1" or 6'2", but he seemed huger because he was like, he wasn't skinny.
He was thick too. Yeah.
Yeah. It was like Ryan Spann or Johnny Walker thing.
Wasn't George Roop like a 145 pounder? He was like 6'1".
George Roop was a 6'1" guy that eventually made it down to 135.
Oh, and Jesus.
Dude, he looked like he belonged in a concentration camp. Like just nothing but cheekbones, collarbones, and hip bones. It was terrifying. And he got knocked out bad at 135.
Sam Patterson, he's 26 years old. He's this crazy long, lengthy fighter. You mentioned 6'4". He's a bit flat-footed. He uses feints well. He doubles his jab, which I like. Straight shots, which is obviously the smart thing for guys as long as him, especially his straight right is really good. He does have, he's not a thick, we were just talking about James Vick being a thicker guy. He's not thick like that, but he has like this tall man's power where he hurts on shots and I think it happens because guys, you get hit further away than when you're ready to exchange. He does throw a lead uppercut, which I hate, and he's going to get blasted for that. He stands tall with his chin high. He throws naked leg kicks. These are all things he's going to get knocked out bad one day. He was briefly hurt in the Contender Series. He looks for takedowns, but he gets in the clinch. Not a strong wrestler. He's more whine on you. He's a weak defensive wrestler, but if he's on top, I like his grappling. He's a heavy top pressure guy, submission threat. He loves his guillotines. Ashmoz, he's 27-year-old. Can fight out of both stances. Great output. Gets to the pocket. He's a pocket boxer where he throws everything hard. Hard hooks, hard kicks, hard calf kicks. He throws a lot of high kicks. I don't think that mattered in this fight, but he throws that pretty quick. He's a very physically strong guy. You can see that in his physique, but also the way he fights. He can wrestle. I for a guy that's short fire hydrant guy, he gets in there and he gets the inside trips, gets in the clinch.
I should throw in one thing here. Anyone who's watching this on YouTube, if you're looking at our Sherdog Fight Finder entries beneath here, you'll see that Ashmoz is listed as 5'10". I'm kind of dubious about that. I think he's probably more like 5'8" or 5'9", and in either event, Patterson is going to look like literally twice his height. But yeah, just keep that in mind when you look at this. I have the feeling that Ashmoz is shorter than we have him listed. Like he looks like a short, burly guy in the cage. Anyway,
that's like the guy who's like 5'4", and people ask him how short he is, and he's really short, but he's gonna lie like I'm 5'6". Like, you're not 5'6".
All right, so Yanal Ashmoz, the bad Tinder date of UFC fighters.
Yeah, he's got to put a couple phone books underneath him when he drives. So he can wrestle. I like that he does a lot of inside trips, which actually will work pretty well against a taller guy. Good top control, hard, mean ground and pound. And if he's taking down, good get-up game. So I'm going to go against my better judgment. And, the huge reach advantage, a huge height advantage says being in the guy's home country, this is, seems like bet on the betting odds that this is a setup fight for Patterson. I'm gonna go the other way. I'm gonna go with an upset. I'm not high in Patterson. I don't like his defense. I like his offense strike. I hate his defensive striking. I think he can get tagged. I think Ashmoz gets inside. he's gonna have a hard time getting Patterson down because it's like you lift the guy up and he's still on his feet. That's tough. But I think he's gonna get like 3 takedowns. I think he's gonna hold him down and ground and pound. And I think he's gonna win his decision. So I'm gonna go with I guess a pretty big upset. I'm gonna go with Ashmoz by decision.
Somewhere in the back of my mind, I know you're right about this pick.
No, I'm not.
in my defense, when Ashmoz does exactly that, like, just know that I knew you were right. But I am going to go with the favorite here. You're right. Like, all of Patterson's bad habits on the feet, he's just going to run into some wrestle boxer that's going to take him down once. And then the second time, that guy's going to fake a level change, hit him with an overhand right, and put him to sleep for 3 weeks. Like, that's exactly what's going to happen to
Stephen's True style. Like,
yeah. Like that's going to be Sam Patterson's first UFC loss, is going to be something like that, where he just needs smelling salts because some, decent UFC lightweight just did exactly that to him. And Ashmoz could, but I haven't seen enough from him to predict that here. As it is, like, Patterson, he's always going to have takedown defense problems that come from having like a 46-inch inseam. When you're all legs and you aren't especially fast on your feet, it's easy for guys to get in on your hips. His typical mode of defense for that is to grab a guillotine. And when it doesn't work, it doesn't work. When it works, it works. I mean, he's got 3 or 4 guillotine submissions in his career. Most of them are from intercepting people, coming in for takedowns. And my gut says that's what happens here, actually. Like, give me Patterson, maybe even to lose the first round, to get taken down or to get clipped on the feet, but to tap out Ashmoz in the second round, with a guillotine, either in reaction to a takedown or just from the clinch, do the tall man. I'm just going to slip my arm over and attack, proactively with a guillotine, and he'll get his 6th submission win.
Yeah, I thought about that. I thought that was of a big possibility.
I love how we're both hedging our bets here because we are not confident right at all. Next up on the UFC 286 prelims is a lightweight matchup between the debuting Chris Duncan, the other Chris Duncan, and Omar Morales. Duncan, the 29-year-old Scot, is 9-1 overall. This will be his UFC debut. He fought twice on the Contender Series. He was there in 2021, where he got knocked out in the second round by Vyacheslav Borshov. He came back in 2022, last August, and knocked out Charlie Campbell after a wild 1 minute, 43-second fight. That was enough to get him signed to the UFC, where he will be greeted by Morales, the 37-year-old Venezuelan who goes by Venezuelan Fighter, which it doesn't have a whole lot of sizzle as a nickname, but it is at the least literally accurate. He is 11-3 overall. He is 3-3 since joining the UFC out of the 2019 season of Dana White's Contender Series. He has lost 2 in a row, and they've both been pretty rough. He got tapped out in the second round by Jonathan Pierce at UFC 266 back in September of 2021. He came back last May at UFC Fight Night, Holm versus Vieira, and got knocked out in the second round by Uros Medic. So he'll be looking to get back above 500 in the UFC. This fight is dead even money. Both gentlemen out there at -115 or -110, but a straight pick 'em, depending on which outlet you go to. Chris Duncan, when I said that this undercard feels like a Bellator Europe undercard, maybe the reason is that Chris Duncan is on it and he's actually a regular of Bellator Europe undercards. He's a lot of fun, but I'm just not sure he's UFC material. I mean, he is a striker by preference. He's a striker by training. He's a knockout artist on regional scenes and like low-level Bellator fights. But the 2 good strikers he fought have schooled him. I mean, Slava Borshov knocked him out. And against Charlie Campbell, yeah, he got the knockout, but it was almost a like Pete Sell versus Scott Smith thing where Campbell, like a more twitchy ref would have stopped that fight about 3 different times in the first 90 seconds, but Duncan survived, stumbled, tumbling all over the place, Campbell teeing off on him, and Duncan got in one perfect right hand, just short right hand, because Campbell came exactly like Pete Sell, just came in for the finish, like chin up in the air, arms out. Duncan crushed him, and the fight was over. But that's not a replicable route to victory against UFC level lightweights. And while he isn't top shelf, Morales is at the very least a UFC level lightweight. That makes me happy because at least he's not trying to be a UFC level featherweight anymore. I mean, the guy has fought at featherweight as well as lightweight in the UFC, and he's just not built for featherweight, especially as he pushes 40. He is a big, like, powerfully built guy. He's very strong. He's not terribly athletic or fast moving or fluid. You know, I think of him as kind of a plotter. He's kind of basic on the feet, and like he is what he is. Like I don't see any top 15 upside for him at 145 or 155. But he's definitely the kind of guy that can punish Duncan for coming in wild and looking for a knockout. And I'm picking him to do so here. Give me Morales by second round TKO, just by, you know, being more composed, more sound, actually probably having more one-shot power, even though Duncan has like a pile of knockouts in his career. Just I think if Duncan is going to be a UFC level fighter, he needs a serious retooling of his approach.
Yeah, this fight sucks. Not in the sense like it won't
right. And we'll move on to the next fight.
Yeah. You know what? Let's do this. Who cares about my analysis? Like, I don't need to break down the same thing you just said. I didn't like this fight. I was gonna take whoever you didn't take just for like I think Morales is done. I really do. I don't think his output has continued to slow down, which was his thing before. He's still a power puncher and he could start somebody. He could wrestle a little bit. Duncan is just all power shots. I like that Duncan throws a lot of kicks. So even though I said I'm not going to give analysis, I'm doing it. I'm going off my memory instead of my notes. I do like he throws hard. You mentioned it. He was hurt. He showed a lot of heart, but I'm going to go with Duncan just because I was going to say whatever Ben didn't take. But why I'm taking Duncan, he can crack, but also if someone doesn't get hurt, I know Duncan's going to have the volume. Like he's going to throw a lot. So I'll go with the younger guy. And yeah, give me Duncan. I'll say he catches him. I'll say he wins by second round knockout.
All right. We have some disagreement. It's not very. It's not vehement disagreement, but we'll know by the end of the second round which of us was right. Next up, and at least as the card is currently constituted, the top prelim of UFC 286 is a featherweight matchup between Jack Shore and Makwan Amirkhani. Shore, the 28-year-old Welshman, is 16-1 in his mixed martial arts career. He is 5-1 since joining the UFC as a former bantamweight champ in Cage Warriors. That one loss actually came in his last outing. He got arm triangled in the second round by Ricky Simone last July at UFC on ABC, Ortega versus Rodriguez. So he'll be looking to come back from the first loss of his career, and standing in his way will be Mr. Finland, whom Ireland claims as his own. The 34-year-old is 17-8 overall. He's 7-6 in the UFC. He lost his last time out, and in fact has lost 4 of 5, but he got knocked out in the second round by Jonathan Pierce at UFC Fight Night Blades versus Aspinall. Again, UFC London 2 of last year. So he's kind of hanging on life support as far as his UFC run goes, and he is not favored to help himself here, as Shore is one of the biggest favorites on the card, coming in at -500, Amirkhani +350. Keith, we've talked a little bit quite recently about how fighters react to their first career loss. We talked just last weekend about Alexander Romanov, coming back from the first loss of his career and looking just flat, disinterested, unprepared against Alexander Volkov. In the recap, I kind of alluded to Ronda Rousey, where clearly, her first loss broke something in her. She only fought one more time and then left the sport forever. Jack Shore does not strike me as the kind of guy who is going to react to his first loss that way. I mean, he's always been kind of serious and businesslike coming up. He never seemed to buy into his own, his own hype coming up. which is why he was probably even a little unsung for a guy who was 16-0.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he had some tough fights along the way. I mean, he faced adversity even before he actually lost a fight. So I don't think we're going to see any, psychological meltdown here. And even if he had one, it might still be enough to get past Amirkhani. I mean, tell me how you see this fight and how much shine, if any, Shore has lost for you.
I'll say this. Obviously, when a guy loses his first fight, it always takes a little bit of shine off a guy because it's hard to see a guy lose until you've seen it. You know what I mean? Or I should say, hard to imagine a guy lose. I remember when I watched that fight, it wasn't that I was down on Shore. It was more like, wow, like Ricky Simone, like what a performance. And in that division, it's so deep. Your eyes, it's so unheard of to continue to rise breaks while taking a loss, especially when you're going against killer after killer after killer. I like Jack Shore. He's definitely not the greatest athlete, but he's very intelligent. He knows what he's good at, and he just goes to it.
What do you think of Shore's decision to move up to 145 here? Do you think it was the right move? And do you think he?
I don't know because I think his size was an advantage to him fighting, especially because of his style. But he also is a guy who depended on cardio. I don't know if it's a reaction that needed to be done. Sometimes the guys loses, but maybe the weight cut was getting to him, and maybe he felt really flat against Simone, and maybe it was necessary. So, it's rare for me to be against guys moving up in weight because obviously it's health reasons, and they obviously understand their body more than we do. And I really don't think strength is. I think strength is really overrated. If you take a 135 pounder and 145 pounder, like you stick them on the bench press, they're bench pressing pretty close to the same amount of weight, So, Shore, he's a pressure fighter who uses a stiff jab. He attacks with good variety, constantly, mixing things up, never attacking on the same thing. He's kind of like a JV version of Alex Volkanovski. What I mean by that is like Volkanovski, you never know what he's going to bring at you. I'm not comparing him to, arguably the greatest fighter in the world, but he keeps you guessing. He works the body well, good calf kicks, shows some power against Timur Valiev. Again, moving up to 145, maybe he gets even more power. His kicking game has become very dangerous. I like his body kicks. His leg kicks are good. He's a really good wrestler, good penetration step, chain wrestles together. Well, he kind of has a relentless attitude to get the fight to the ground. He can also clinch and get some body lock takedowns. Good at winning scrambles. I love that when he gets the fight to the ground, he doesn't rush things. Very Dagestan style, where you try to grab like one limb and keep that, grab the wrist, motorcycle ride down, or grab the elbow and chop it down, or something like just slowly controlling, not rushing anything. Good back takes. He's got 8 submission wins in his career. He did look flat against Ricky Simone, and Ricky Simone hurt him on the feet. But again, I really do think that was more about Ricky Simone. Now, Amirkhani, at this point, we know what he is. He's a southpaw. He works behind a jab, throws some weird angles because he kind of keeps his hands low, a little bit of an up jab, and everything he does on the feet is to close the distance where he can shoot. He's a relentless. Like, I'll give him that. He'll just keep shooting. It's kind of like if Merab gassed out a little bit, like for Merab standards. Like, he's not. If you give him a 25-minute fight, he's not going to shoot 50 times, but he might shoot 25. So I like his entries. I think they're good. I don't like that he doesn't set up. I think he needs to set him up a little bit more, especially as the fight goes on. He starts diving a little bit, but and he's been hurt because of that. Like Lerone Murphy set him up perfectly. If he gets on top, good top game, hard ground and pound. He is a submission threat. And he's creative with the submissions. He's got 13 subs. Loves like attacking the head. Even like when he's behind, he'll jump out to the front. Darce chokes. He caught Mike Grundy with a beautiful Darce choke. But he's slowed down. He's slowed down a lot because that's a really relentless pace. I mean, he gassed out against Jonathan Pierce bad. I'm starting to get worried about his chin. He was dropped by Edson Barboza, hurt by Jason Knight, hurt by Shane Burgos, hurt by Lerone Murphy. And besides Jason Knight, those are some pretty good losses, to guys. As far as prediction goes, Amirkhani is a tricky person. This is just not the matchup for him. This is a terrible stylistic matchup for him. he's going to want to get the fight to the ground, and he, even though Shaw is moving up and away, I'm going to guess that he's bigger than Amirkhani when they fight. And Shaw's a good wrestler. He's not going to gas out. He's facing the guy that has a limited gas can. I think Shaw wins the wrestling scrambles. I think he ends up on top. I think he might even finish him. I think he grounds upon him when I'll see Amirkhani slows down and Shaw grounds upon him. So give me Shaw. I'll say first round TKO.
Yeah, I'm on board with basically everything you threw out there. I do like Shaw moving up here for the same reasons you said. Anytime a fighter wants to move up, they haven't been forced, but they want to move up a weight class, I'm all for it, just on principle. It's healthier, and I always better that than moving down in weight to try to solve a problem, which it usually doesn't. I think it's funny that you mentioned that Shore has kind of a deliberate, methodical top game like a Dagestani, considering that we talked a little while ago about Muhammad Mokaev, who is literally from Dagestan and is too spastic on top and too impatient.
Yeah.
And that may change, with age and maturity for him. But Shore, actually, mature is the best word I can think of for him. Like, he's been in the UFC since he was like 25 or 26, and he's just always fought very much like a veteran. I think he's one of the smarter fighters in the division quietly. For him to lose to Amirkhani would require him to make a mistake, basically. And that's something I haven't really seen out of him. I haven't seen many tactical mistakes or bad game plans out of Shore. Even the loss to Simone, the most shocking thing out of that was seeing him get badly out wrestled by somebody, because what precipitated the finish was Simone slamming him all over the place in the second round. Like, he hurt him in the first round, but in the second round, he got a pretty high amplitude takedown, and Shore just couldn't get away from him, and ended up tapping him out on the ground. That's not Amirkhani. Amirkhani gets a lot of submissions, but you mentioned he's much more of an opportunistic guy, gets things in scrambles, gets things off the bottom, definitely gets things off the front headlock. I mean, his last 3 wins in the UFC have all been by anaconda choke. For Shore to fall into that, he would have to fall into it, and I just don't see that. And with all else being equal, no, Shore's going to be the younger guy, the more active guy. I think he will be roughly the same size and at least as strong. This is just a bad matchup for Amirkhani. Give me Shore probably I'm going to say by TKO in the third round. Amirkhani, is still tough to put away unless you just crush him with a single hard technique, which isn't really Shore's game. So I'm going to say he makes it to the third round, but he's badly behind. He's gassed out, and Shore just takes him down one more time and pounds him out. The UFC 286 main card kicks off with a middleweight matchup between Marvin Vettori and Roman Dolidze. Vettori, the 29-year-old Italian, is 18-6-1 overall. He is 8-4-1 in the UFC. He is coming off a loss in his last outing. He dropped a unanimous decision to Robert Whittaker at UFC Fight Night Gone versus Tuivasa last September. Prior to that, he took a unanimous decision over Paulo Costa in the famous wine hangover and intentional 20-pound weight miss fight. And then prior to that had been his title shot and rematch with Israel Adesanya back in June of 2021, which he lost by unanimous decision. So he will be hoping to get back into the win column, and standing across from him and being welcomed kind of to the big leagues of middleweight is Dolidze. The 34-year-old Georgian is 12-1 overall. He is 6-1 in the UFC, and he has rattled off 4 straight wins since his loss to Trevin Giles 2 years ago. Those being Laureano Staropoli, Kyle Dawkins, Phil Hawes, and Jack Hermanson. The most recent of those, the Hermanson fight, was a second-round TKO win for Dolidze at UFC on ESPN, Thompson versus Holland in December. So Dolidze looking for his 5th straight win, looking to certify himself an actual title contender in this division. He is not favored to do so. Vettori, minus 300. Dolidze, plus 220. Keith, we've talked about this every time we've talked about one of those fights. With every win, even though I'm now smart enough to start picking Dolidze in his fights, I'm like, I'm surprised he made it this far. He came in to next to no real expectations. He was, 32-year-old light heavyweight, and then decided to cut to middleweight despite being built like an absolute brick shit house.
Yeah.
And yet here he is with a legit, at least top 15, if not top 10 win in his back pocket, and more like a top 5 or 7 opponent ahead of him. Like this dude isn't far down Sean Shelby's phone scroll.
No, and he's fun too.
Yeah. And if Israel Adesanya wins the title back, I mean, he might be the next guy after the trilogy. He'd be almost the last man standing that Adesanya hasn't beat yet. Like if Adesanya beats Pereira in the next, they're going to do an immediate rematch.
Okay.
But Dolidze might be the next guy waiting after that.
Wow. Well, they have to do the trilogy. Yeah, they do the trilogy fight. Then Izzy wins both of them, you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's an obvious pick.
Well, I mean, what if Bo Nickel, he's on vacation? Anyway,
I was saving a Bo Nickel reference at the very end, but you set that up too easy.
all that to say, I guess I shouldn't be surprised by him anymore. But apparently, some people are going to be surprised if he wins on Saturday because Vettori is a 3-1 favorite here. Let me know how you think this fight plays out.
Yeah, I'm surprised by that. It's. I kind of go over the odds in my head, and I didn't know who was going to be the favorite because, the shiny toy kind of gets the odds a little bit sometimes. So I thought it'd at least be close to a pick'em fight. I mean, he just beat Jack Hermanson, and he calf sliced him and ground and pound him in one of the most brutal finishes you'll ever see.
Yeah.
And Marvin Vettori's coming off a loss. So, obviously it was Todorovic Whitaker, but Vettori's a really strong guy. Like that's the first thing I think of when I think of the guy. Built, he's a pressure striker that works well when he gets into the pocket. Head movement and shoulder rolls are kind of his defense. He lands a lot of hard power hooks. It's funny because, we've talked about this a lot, breaking down Vettori. He's starting to show power, which was so surprising that he was not one of the guys that you just think of Marvin Vettori, oh yeah, big power puncher. Then you're like, well, he really isn't. He's not a guy who knocks guys out considering as ripped he is. He doesn't fight as the way you think, but he can get a little left hand happy for me, looking for the same punch. He can drop his hands, which is a little troublesome. I like that he works the body. He's strong in the clinch. He's a very underrated grappler. He's an underrated wrestler. He gets some good entries, strong top control. He is a submission threat if you make a mistake, and he has cardio. Like we've seen him go 25 minutes, and when he's lost matches, it was not because of his cardio. Dolidze, he might be the only guy in the division that's more physically imposing than Vettori. Maybe Randy Costa, if he's still in the division.
Paulo Costa,
sorry.
Randy Costa, not so much.
Yeah, no, not so much. Sorry. He's very raw on the feet. He's not very comfortable, and it's funny because he looked worse on his feet against Hermanson than he did in the fights before that. Like he almost took a step back, but he does have power, and he's been using like feints and stuff to try to set up. But if he lands, he throws hard hooks. He loves his overhand right. He loves his left hook. He's got crushing power. We saw what he did to Kyle Dawkins. Which isn't a win that aged well, but at that time was a good, solid win. Hard, thundering leg kicks. He does check leg kicks, which I like. One concern I had in his last fight is his output on the feet was very low. Like he was letting Hermanson get ahead of him and not challenging him on things, and he was losing because of it. If he gets to the clinch, he's strong. Especially he's mean in there, batters the body with knees. He's a good wrestler. And it's funny because I always thought of him as like a topside wrestler, and that is not him. He's an incredible grappler. I mean, he swept Jack. I mean, we always think about the calf slicer and all that, but he swept Jack Hermanson, which is a hell of a feat. And Jack Hermanson's a really good grappler himself. Yep. And he's a submission threat, as we mentioned. Mean ground and pound. I'm still worried about his cardio. We haven't seen him fight really hard deep into fights. I think the betting line is way off. It's to me, I did just do a betting show for the last event, so I'll give a little betting. It's either dog or pass to me, where I'm going Dolidze with the odds because I think they should be much closer. That said, I wasn't sure if Vettori was going to be the underdog, and I'm actually going with Vettori in a straight pick 'em. Like, who am I picking to win? I'm not betting on him. I like his output on the feet. He's shown in the past that he's tough to submit. I think he's very underrated on the ground. I think he just danced. I think this fight might look a lot like the beginning of the Hermanson fight, where he's moving, sticking and moving, beating Dolidze with long strikes. And I think JP Buys is going to be happy because I think Vettori is going to beat Dolidze by unanimous decision.
Oh, poor JP. Poor JP. Yeah, I was surprised at the lines on this one as well. And I say that as somebody who admittedly has consistently underestimated Roman Dolidze on his way up. Like, I thought Jack Hermanson would be too much for him. And instead, he pulled something on Hermanson that I'd never, like, nobody's done that to Jack Hermanson.
Yeah, it was incredible.
Barely anybody's done that in the UFC, period.
Yeah,
like,
it was one of the most memorable moments of that was last year, right?
Yeah, it was last year.
Yeah, that was one of the most memorable moments.
It was last December. Like, time flies.
Yeah, I knew it was recently.
Yeah. No,
I wasn't sure if it was like December or January. That's what I was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, aside from the punches in the head, it almost looked like a pro wrestling finisher. Like, how did you get that? Like, this is the Scorpion Deathlock, or it's the Boston Crab. Like,
you got to get a 1980s reference in there.
Yeah, that too. Yeah. Vettori, it's wild to think this guy is still just 29 years old. He came to the UFC young enough. I mean, he came to the UFC at like 22 and pretty quickly made his way into, I mean, before he made his way into contention, he made his way like onto main cards and stuff just as a European. And I guess some people think he's good looking. I don't know. At any rate, he's been in the spotlight long enough that it's surprising to me that he's still not 30 years old. And there's a good chance that he is still improving because he talks like a complete meathead and he looks kind of like a meathead, but he doesn't fight like one. He has improved his game over the course of his UFC run. He lost to Adesanya both times, but he was a better fighter the second time. Just so was Adesanya, and his poison is just like defensively sound strikers with good takedown defense. Like that's what he can't handle. I think his decision to move his training to the US and to King's MMA very early in his career has it stood him in good stead. I don't think he'd be as good an offensive wrestler as he is right now if he just stayed in Italy training somewhere.
Ben, are you saying that Italians don't have good wrestling?
I'm sure the Italian Wrestling Federation is gonna get at me like they in the Kentucky Judo Federation can kind of like line up at my door. Yeah. But like working at King's, I mean, I don't know if Mark Munoz is still there, but like they have a good staff. Here, I'm picturing Dolidze's route to victory, and I'm picturing the ways he's beaten other people in the past, even the ones that have surprised me. Like, I would be shocked if he got Vettori into another situation like he did Hermanson. I would be shocked if he just lamped Vettori with like he did Phil Hawes or Kyle Dawkins. Those are things that just we haven't seen done to Vettori. Like, Vettori is what he is. He's come up definitively short when he's gotten into the title picture, but he's never been finished in 5 or 6 years of fighting the best the division has to offer. And he's rarely even been in serious trouble or badly hurt. I mean, he is just this like stocky, like weird Italian tank who marches forward and does his game. I'm with you that Dolidze's cardio is a mild concern. I would have said it'd be a huge concern when he dropped to 185, again, just considering how huge he was, but it's not been a serious liability. I mean, he lost to Giles, at least partly because he was the more tired guy in the third round, but it's not like he's completely fallen off a cliff. But Vettori, like, actually maintains a higher pace and higher volume late into fights. And I think that's what this fight might turn on. Give me a pretty fun 3-round slugfest. If Dolidze can get takedowns on Vettori, this will get a lot more interesting in a real hurry, and my pick will have been wrong. But I don't think he's going to be able to. I think this is mostly going to take place on the feet unless Vettori sneaks in a reactive takedown.
He may.
Yeah. So give me Vettori to win 2 rounds out of 3. If I'm guessing, probably the second and third, and cruise on to a victory and just say some like loud, wild shit on the mic afterwards.
I just kept thinking about when you bash Italy. I did not bash Italy, just for the record. But I just pictured like this big Tony Soprano guy grabbing his computer and throwing it across the room, like and then some other guy saying, forget about that show.
Either that or like some dude just like raises his hand and the dude in the silk suit like walks out the door with like a silenced gun to like just put me away.
That's it. Next show it's the Shilling and Dev show. Shilling
and Dev show, and like Duffy's got like a horse head in his bed. Yeah, like
I didn't picture Ben like this. I picked him to win. No.
Next up on the UFC London main card is a women's flyweight matchup between Jennifer Maia and Casey O'Neill. Maia, the 34-year-old Brazilian, is 29-1 overall. She is an even 5-5 in the UFC since joining as the former Invicta flyweight champ. Though her record in the UFC is 5-5, that reflects her being thrown into the deepest of the deep end of the pool right out of the gate, and she did get as far as a title shot against former champ Valentina Shevchenko, a mostly one-sided washing that nonetheless saw her make at least one round relatively close, and that was good enough for a moral victory at the time. She won her last time out. It was a unanimous decision win over Marina Moroz at UFC Fight Night Zechikwu versus Kudalaba in November. So looking to make it 2 in a row, she'll be taking on a young Aussie who's looking to make it 10 in a row. Casey O'Neill, 25-year-old from Queensland, is a perfect 9-0 as a professional mixed martial artist. She is a perfect 4-0 in the UFC. She last fought just over a year ago, taking a split decision over the retiring Roxanne Modafferi, who, as usual for Roxy, was a much tougher ask than she's given credit for. But nonetheless, O'Neill did enough to get it done. And with that, her 4th straight UFC win, she had done enough to get a legit top 10 opponent, which is Maia. And despite the step up in competition, O'Neill is a moderate favorite to win. She is minus 185, Maia plus 145. Keith, we're going to be talking about Justin Gaethje here in a little bit. Talk about being just thrown into the deep end of the UFC waters because of what you did on the way in. But Jennifer Maia had to fight Liz Carmouche in her UFC debut. Like probably a top 5 woman. It just has gotten next to no breaks.
Yeah. Who do you think her easiest opponent has been so far in the UFC?
Roxanne Modafferi, that I just said is always tougher than people think she's going to be.
Sure. Yeah, she's tricky. Yeah.
And she'd already beaten Modafferi in Invicta. Other than that, it's like Alexis Davis won a fight last year. Like she's Jessica.
Alexis Davis fought for the title.
Yeah. Like sad to say, probably Joanne Wood, because Joanne Wood was a terrible style matchup for her too.
You're probably right.
Yeah. But anyway, I mean, she's fought all like her losses: Liz Carmouche, Caitlin Chukagian, Valentina Shevchenko, Chukagian again, and Manon Fior. Yeah. All champs, former title challengers, or someone in Fior who will probably fight for a title before the end of the year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. She's 34. Does she have anything left in the tank, or is this Casey time?
She's 34. Like, she's not super old. She's younger than you think. Do I think she's gonna win a UFC title? Well, they know, but she's a tough test. You beat Jennifer Maia, you're good. So I mean, Maia, she's not a great athlete. Like that's, if we have a race of all the top 15 fighters in the division, she's probably going last. She's a bit flat-footed. But she's well-rounded. I mean, she's a technically sound boxer, some quick hands. She marches down her foe, stalks them. throws straight punches down the pipe, attacks with combinations, good at beating her opponent to the point of contact. Due to her lack of athleticism, she does struggle to cut off the cage, and which is why Caitlin Chikagian was like a terrible, tough stylistic matchup for her. Though we pointed this out, she did much better against Manon Ferro. Like she lost that fight, but Ferro was trying to move against her, and she was cutting off the cage better. I like her clinch striking. She can get in the clinch. She can grind in there. She can wrestle. She can hit a takedown too. She doesn't look for her wrestling enough, but she should, because she's strong on top. She's got a good submission game. That's why someone like Joanne Wood was such a, a favorable matchup for her, that she can just take her down and submit her. Move over to Casey O'Neill. What I love about Casey O'Neill, she's 25, and it's a fine line between being like cocky and needing to be humbled, or just having this altered confidence of what you're going to go out there and do it. Like, that's why someone like Erin Blanchfield is the perfect one, because she is super confident, knows she's the next big thing, but also like somehow comes off as humble when she says it. Like, she just says it like it's a matter of fact, not like cocky. Well, Casey O'Neill, she's got this edge, and she has this like, she's got that bad bitch thing going on. Like, that like, and I don't mean that as an insult. I mean it as a compliment. Like you mentioned Ronda Rousey having, I remember I loved Joanna Jędrzejczyk when she was that get in your face, like, how dare you even think you can even challenge for the belt kind of thing. And Casey O'Neill has a little bit of that going with her, and I love it.
Like, dude, who mean mugs Roxanne Modafferi?
I know.
And I'm not even mad about it. Like, Roxanne wasn't mad. Like, just,
no, yeah. Roxanne, that's how great she is. She Casey O'Neill, her skills are there too. I mean, she's a high output striker that just crushes people with her pressure. You mentioned Roxanne Modafferi. She folded because of the pressure. Antonia Shevchenko couldn't handle the pressure. She's a Muay Thai striker with quick hands, I'd say, plus power, who is now at 25, just entering her like power years. And remind you, she was, last time we saw her fight was 23. Like, I mean, you make a big jump from in 2 years, or a year and a half, whatever, since she's fought. Something she needs to improve. I mean, she keeps her chin high in the air. That's something, and defensively, but like everyone has that at this age. She's a very good wrestler, which is really surprising, being someone from that region of the world. It's better than Italian wrestling, but
not only an Australian, but one who like principally trains at Tiger Muay Thai, which isn't normally thought of. Like, it ain't AKA. Like,
yeah. And they have very underrated wrestling. But just my point, like, when we think about wrestling, we think American wrestling, and we think the Middle East and Russia. Yeah, like, those are your powerhouses for wrestling. With the here and there, a couple outlets, a couple, Japan can have a good wrestler here and there, but generally speaking, you know what I'm saying. Yeah, she chains takedowns together well. She's got solid grappling, strong top game, mean ground and pound. She finished Shayna Dobson with ground and pound in her UFC debut, and she's a submission threat. We saw that against Laura Procopia. Going from Modafferi to Maia, I think, is a massive step up, being that she's been out for a while. And why she was out, I mean, she tore ACL, which is really scary stuff, but it's not what it used to be. Like, I remember, like, 10 years ago, you said you tore your ACL, you were done. Like, your career was over. Yeah. You think about like Terrell Davis and running backs like that. That's not the case anymore. Now you see people tear their ACL, they come back to look better than ever. So I am still a little worried, just because I'm old and ACL bothers me. But then I think of someone like, shout out to Spencer Lee, who's come back from 2 torn ACLs in wrestling, and I've never seen a wrestler as dominant as he is right now. So O'Neill's a great athlete. She's young, so it's, again, I think that matters too. It's not she's not 28, 29, 30 tearing it. She was 23. I think it's gonna be a coming out party. I was watching I think it was Era Hawani talking about the fights, and like Casey O'Neill was pissed off, like, you guys all forgot, and she was texting him and say, like, I love that. So I say she smokes Maia with volume. I think she adds in her own takedowns, gets some ground and pound. I'm gonna say O'Neill wins unanimous decision. I'm gonna say Maia's tough, so she'll probably, I don't think she'll get a finish, but overall, O'Neill by decision.
Yeah, I like the breakdown there a lot. Jennifer Maia is incredibly tough, pretty defensively sound, well-rounded. I mean, difficult to finish. She spent 5 rounds in the cage with Valentina Shevchenko and was never especially close to being finished. Just couldn't keep up. O'Neal, I agree with everything you said about her. And obviously, we both are believers in Erin Blanchfield, and I have the feeling these two women are going to fight at some point, probably for a title or a title shot. And I can't wait until it happens. But out of the whole crop of flyweight women that are like shooting up the ranks right now, O'Neal is the one that I would probably favor over Blanchfield. Like, doesn't have.
I wouldn't do that.
I know you wouldn't.
I'm just saying.
But the last thing I want to do is break down O'Neal versus Blanchfield right now. We're in the middle of a 15 fight card. But O'Neal brings like a level of sheer physicality that Montefiore does, but like not many other women in the division on the way up do. Like she's big framed. Like I've been face to face with her. She was actually her last fight, the fight with Mokaev, was here in Houston. So I was there all week. I was there for all the
What so is she? So she was. What's the deal with? I mean, she represents Scotland and Australia. What's the deal? She's Australian or she's Scottish?
I think she might have been born in Scotland, and she's definitely of Scottish descent. But I mean, they live and grew up in Australia. Like, she has an Australian accent. I went to school in Australia. Like, I'm in semi-regular touch with her brother Cam, who was a former fighter himself. He runs Eternal MMA, which is one of the better promotions in Australia, and where she had her first 4 or 5 fights. And I kind of gave him like some grief, but I'm like, dude, who gets in Roxanne Modafferi's face? He's like, it made me laugh too, man. It's like, it wasn't scripted, I promise. Like, she's just, she's just at that moment where she's kind of like feeling all of her energy, and
yeah, I love it.
Yeah, it's not disrespect for Modafferi or anyone else. Like, you said it very well. It's like I am the woman of destiny. Like, how dare you even like be in front of me right now? If she's all good from the knee injury, I agree with you that this is probably a coming out party. Maia is so solid, but Neil is going to be bigger, longer range. She's good at using her range. Probably better one-shot power. She's really dangerous on the ground. I'm not going to pick a finish because, again, Maia has never been finished, really hasn't been close to finish that I can remember. But I think O'Neal probably wins in a washing here, and it's seen as her propulsion up to, okay, now she's beaten the top 10 fighter. Now we need to decide what to do with her, because the title picture is getting a little crowded, and let's not let any of our up and coming prospects, get knocked off too soon or spend too much time on the shelf. Give me O'Neal in a dominant decision here, where I'm going to guess that the fight primarily takes place on the feet, because that's where O'Neal wants it. Like, O'Neal stings Maia in space, probably get some clinch exchanges where she punishes her. Maia tries to bring the fight to the ground and can't. O'Neal wins all 3 rounds. Third from the top on the UFC 286 main card is a welterweight matchup between Gunnar Nelson and Brian Barberena. Nelson, the 34-year-old Icelander by way of Dublin, longtime SBG Ireland exponent, is 18-5-1 overall. He's 9-5 in the UFC. He is coming off a win. He fought almost exactly a year ago at the first UFC London card of last year, taking a unanimous decision over Takashi Sato. Prior to that, he had lost back-to-back fights against Gilbert Burns and Leon Edwards. Obviously, 2 losses that have aged pretty well, but those were all the way back in 2019. He had a pretty lengthy layoff in between. He will look to make it 2 in a row against Barberena. The 33-year-old American is 18-9 overall. He's 9-8 in the UFC. He is coming off a loss. He fought at UFC on ESPN, Thompson versus Holland last December, where he got tapped out in the second round by Rafael dos Anjos. Prior to that, he had won 3 straight over Darian Weeks, Matt Brown, and Robbie Lawler. So he'll be looking to get back in the win column. He is most decidedly not favored to do so. Nelson is out there at -400. Barberena +320. And I should mention, Barberena is in on not ultra short notice, but this fight had been originally scheduled to be Nelson versus Daniel Rodriguez. Rodriguez was forced to withdraw. Barberena got the call. But again, it was on probably like a month's notice. Keith, I'm going to ask you a trivia question before I break down this fight. So Gunnar Nelson, this is his 15th UFC fight. He has fought 14 times in the UFC. How many of those fights took place in the United States?
2.
Nailed it. 2 out of his 14
Pure
UFC
luck.
fights have taken place in the UFC, and both of those he was on Conor McGregor cards where there was already a bus coming over from Dublin.
Sure.
Other than that, he's fought once in Canada, and then it's all Europe cards. It's almost unheard of for a guy who was actually a top 10 guy for a while there to just never fight in the US. Kind of wild, but he has his priorities. And funny thing is, Nelson, he has that kind of Icelandic personality, just like super mellow, super chill, super laid back. Even when he was scraping the top 10, I never felt as though his goals really included winning a UFC title. Like, that sounded like a lot of work. He'd rather like fight some guys, have some fun fights, hang around with his friends, train jiu-jitsu with Connor, and
have matchups that are bad stylistic matchups for him.
Yeah.
Like go against other extremely high level jiu-jitsu guys.
And he took on Damian Maia. That's the worst.
He'd rather do that than, fight a guy who's higher in the rankings that he's going to beat. Yeah.
It must be incredibly freeing not to have to stress out about that stuff. And I say this as a guy that thinks like Nelson is pretty cool. And
maybe he's the opposite. Maybe on the cameras like that at home, he's like smashing things and he's he's angry all the time, yelling at his wife and stuff. I
have a hard time picturing that, but I fully admit I do not know what happens within the Nelson household. Man, this fight, a lot of this card, understandably built up to get winnable fights for the UK/Ireland/ adoptive UK.
A little bit of a theme there. A little bit of a theme.
And here, Danny Rodriguez, if that had been the fight that made it to the cage, I would have been like, this is kind of a trap fight.
Yeah.
Rodriguez has had a rough skid recently, but he'd be a younger guy with less tread off the tires, who's far more active. And I don't know if I would have picked the upset. I didn't really tape it or anything, but
sure,
replacing him with Barberena makes this one a whole lot easier. I was slower to come around on jumping off the Barberena train than you were. And it's not like I was ever pulling the horn, and I was just like, Barberena falls in that kind of action fighter in the welterweight division, middle range. He's in there with the Nico Price, Vicente Luque. You go down the Alex Morono, but he's beneath all those guys because, one, on top of everything else, he seems to be prematurely shot. He's slowed down, his cardio has waned, and his chin is gone.
I don't know if his cardio has, because his cardio is what killed Robbie Lawler.
Okay,
main cardio, but that's all he has left.
And he has enough cardio left to take out 40-year-old Robbie Lawler, who is legit on time shot, not prematurely shot. But no, you're right. But the chin has abandoned him, and
he's the worst grappler in the UFC.
He's
the worst defensive wrestler.
He's definitely the worst one in that division.
Okay,
if you go up to heavyweight, he'd be dead middle of the pack. But
we're talking about how great his wrestling is.
Yeah, you go up to women's featherweight, he's he's mid. But at welterweight, he probably is the worst, and that spells terrible news against Nelson, because Nelson is a fantastic grappler. In terms of outside the cage distinctions, he's not. He's obviously not Damian Maia or Jacare Ray. He's not a multiple time Abu Dhabi or Mundial's champ, but he's a former champion grappler. It's crossed over well to MMA. He's very, very good on the ground, and not always fantastic at getting the fight to the ground, but he should be able to get the fight to the ground if he wants. What this fight will hinge on is how long Nelson wants to spend bouncing around in his like goofy karate stance.
Yeah.
And throw and like flicking out those front kicks before, he just shoots or clinches. And even if he decides to waste most of the first round doing that, Barberena's always been a volume guy on the feet. It's not like he's going to crush Nelson with one shot to make him pay for that choice.
No.
So
he gets you tired and then he takes over.
Yeah. And
which could happen.
It could. But I don't think it's going to get to that point. Give me Nelson to come out, do the Stephen Thompson bladed stance without, any of the techniques that like spring off of it, throw a couple kicks. But by the middle of the first round, he'll shoot a takedown on Barberena, get him down, take his back, rear naked choke, and just make it seem as inevitable as the sunrise. Give me Gunnar Nelson by first round submission.
Yeah. I just picture Gunnar Nelson. So I'm just going to do this. I'm not going to break this down. I'm going to save some time again. This is going to be actually one of our shorter, really huge cards, unless we spend a lot of time on the next two fights, which I'm sure we will. I'm not going to do, you know how I feel about Brian Barberena at this point. And Gunnar Nelson, he seems almost semi-retired himself, but he could be fully retired and he's still a terrible stylist matchup. I picture Gunnar Nelson just in Iceland, unbelievable, beautiful, scenery, laying in a hammock, no, maybe in his backyard, completely naked, drinking like a V8 or something, because he's a weirdo.
You're painting the picture of a weirdo. I'm getting it. Listen to a Fish album. And honestly, he could have not trained jiu-jitsu for 5 years, and I'd still take him bopping off the hammock and winning and taking down Brian Barberena and submitting him. So I say he takes down Barberena, he submits him in the first round, and pops open a VA and heads back to Iceland. Let's do this. If the UFC ever holds an Iceland card, we're gonna hold Sherdog hostage. We're not gonna do another show until me and Ben get sent out to the UFC Iceland card. I would love that. Yeah, we'll go to Iceland. That brings us to the co-main event of UFC London, a lightweight matchup between Justin Gaethje and Rafael Fiziev. Gaethje, the 34-year-old Arizonan, is 23-4 overall. He is 6-4 since joining the UFC as the outgoing World Series of Fighting lightweight champ. He lost his last time out. It was a title fight against then champ Charles Oliveira last May at UFC 274, where he was dropped, hurt, choked out in about 3 minutes. Quick and humiliating defeat, for the lightweight standout. Prior to that, he had taken a unanimous decision over Michael Chandler in 2021's Fight of the Year. And before that, he had fought former champ Khabib Nurmagomedov back in October of 2020. That one also ended in a submission. That one a triangle in the second round after being soundly out-wrestled for most of the fight. He will be looking to get back in the win column and reaffirm himself as a factor in the title picture against the surging Fiziev. The 30-year-old Azerbaijani, by way of Thailand, is 12-1 overall. He's 6-1 in the UFC. Debuted in the UFC almost 4 years ago at UFC Fight Night Overeem versus Oleinik and got knocked out in about 90 seconds by Magomed Mustafayev. Since then, it's been nothing but wins for him, however. He fought most recently last July in the headliner of UFC on ESPN 39, knocking out former champ Rafael dos Anjos early in the fifth round. This would be his sixth win in a row, would certainly certify him as a title contender sooner than later, maybe as soon as sometime this year. And he is a comfortable favorite to get it done. Fiziev minus 220, Gaethje plus 190. Keith,
Holy shit.
For those who are taking in this as an audio podcast rather than a video, you did not see Keith's trademark. I cannot believe that line eyebrow thing that he does. I'm going to toss this to you first for sure, but we just talked about Jennifer Maia being 5-5 in the UFC just because she was like thrown to the wolves immediately. Gaethje can say much the same. I mean, he debuted against Michael Johnson, who is, at the very least, he is a trap fight for anybody, especially in 2017. He's someone who could jump up and bite just about anybody in the division at any time. And from there, it's been nothing but pretty tough pretty tough matchups from there on out. Like his so-called easy fight was probably against James Vick. And at the time, Vick was on like a 5-fight winning streak and was favored in the fight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's had a freaking run. It's funny. It reminds me of, I used to coach high school wrestling, and we had this kid. I don't even remember his name. What a character. He was like a first-year wrestler, but he was like this big loudmouth, but he was fun. Like he'd win and he'd do the crip walk. But he was wrestling JV and shit. But he like never understood that JV was lower than varsity. Like he just never understood that. Like I still remember there was a kid. There was two guys in Rhode Island. They were, I love it. It was one of the greatest rivalries in Rhode Island history. And the top two guys in New England, they refused to get out of each other's weight class and everything. And they both had an ego. I loved it. And one of the guy I coached ended up winning the rivalry, but then he went on. Then he went out to Arizona instead of wrestling. Got addicted to meth and started going on a string of bank robberies. No lie. But back to the story. I still remember he had this unbelievable match, and it was them two guys going against each other. And I can't remember what happened, but he won in like double overtime, triple. It was like one of those. They always had these unbelievable matches against each other. And I still remember this old JV kid going like off to him, like, dude, in the third period when you had this move, why didn't you just do the move that I did to that guy? And talking about the JVs, like, you're like, man, like you had this really close match, man. I smoked my guy, like. So it's like not all 5-5s in the UFC are equal, you know. Justin Gaethje's 5-5 is a little different than you know. You could see like Patty Pimblett pulling Justin Gaethje aside and saying something like that to him. So like, when Khabib was doing this to you, why didn't you do what I did to this sub 500 fighter? I can see like Luana Carolina go to like, hey, I got a winning record in the UFC. What's the matter, Justin? Why is he in the co-main event? Like, yeah. So that's just, by the way, that is a true story about the bank robberies. Apparently, I could teach him some wrestling moves, but I couldn't teach him life lessons. I was shocked when you said the betting lines. Like again, like I always try to guess the betting lines, and I thought Gaethje was gonna be like based on the name and the guys he's beaten and everything. I thought he was gonna be the slight favorite. Like I was gonna have him like negative 120. Wow, I'm shocked. Like, I mean, I get it. The style of these two guys, you figure a striking battle, and Fiziev is a known really good striker, but so is Justin Gaethje. Justin Gaethje is a really good striker. He's a pocket boxer with big power. I mean, every one of his fights, even the losses, other than Habib Nurmagomedov, he's had moments in every single fight where he's rocked guys and hurt guys and almost put them out. Like say you want Justin Gaethje, he was seconds away from a UFC championship.
Yep.
He's gonna be known as that guy that was so close, and Matt Ryan, like right there, like one break changes and he's got a Super Bowl title. Kind of the same thing with Justin Gaethje. I'm going to read my previous notes on Jason because I was going to look at things and mix some things around and change things. And I just remember like how I wrote this, and I like it. One thing I like about Justin Gaethje is that he's shown so many things in the past as strengths, and they're different almost like every fight. Like he had this overhand right against James Vick, this left hook that butchered Tony Ferguson, leg kicks on everyone, but especially the Edson Barboza with the leg kicks was such a big thing. His dirty boxing and grabbing the back of the head and uppercutting and landing hard hooks in the dirty boxing rage against Donald Cerrone. Like, I love that he's adding these things. And since the Tony Ferguson fight, he's become more technical and technically sound and controlled, which is like why I'm surprised the betting lines is really disrespecting him that much. Now, he's got hard leg kicks, some of the hardest leg kicks we've ever seen. I mean, he won a kicking battle against Edson Barboza, where they were both kicking each other, and Edson was the one that was like, F this. And I mean, we know if we had the club of, if we had the club of leg kickers, who's your Mount Rushmore of leg kickers? I mean, Barboza and Gaethje are both on the list, right?
I mean, Barboza and Gaethje are both on it, yeah.
Oh, but I mean, just off the top of me, I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody, but I'd probably throw Aldo and probably maybe Pedro Hizzo. I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody, okay? Yeah. So it's also, midnight when we're doing this. But my point is, like, he made Edson Barboza quit the kicking battle. He's got tons of defensive holes, and that's the argument against Justin Gaethje. He's still back straight up. He's been rocked. So as much as we say, like, oh, he's had all these great moments in MMA and even in losses, he's had moments where he's hurt guys. He's also in wins. He's had moments where he got hurt. So his wrestling is grossly overrated. Like I'm mentioning his wrestling. He never used it. Second one, he was an All-American. I think he placed 7th, and it was like 12 years ago or something like that. So it was so long ago. Wrestling.
Northern Arizona Lumberjack Wrestling represents.
Yeah. Well, do you remember when DC talked to? And I'm bringing up. I already used him, but there was a really cool moment where DC was talking to Bo Nickel before his debut, and he talked about, hey, you're in the Penn State room every day. Like, don't lose that. Like, wrestling. Like, Gaethje's lost his wrestling because, I understand he wrestles with Kamaru Usman, but it's not the same. He's not grinding with Peyton Robb or some some guy like that. And I don't think at his age, I don't think he can wrestle for long periods of time. Now, Fiziev, another thing that Gaethje hasn't mentioned, Gaethje's much bigger than Fiziev. He's a smaller lightweight. Like I've said this before, he looks like he'd go down to 145.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he should, just for the record, but he looks like he could. If he's so fun to watch strike. He's the coach of Tiger Muay Thai, which is all you need to know when it comes to striking. I don't know if he's still the striking coach, but at one point he was. He could fight out of both stance where he's really good either way. I think I prefer him in the southpaw stance. He's so technical, very tight shots, so accurate. He attacks fast combinations in the pocket, such zip in his shots, nice snap in his shots. His return is just as fast coming back, which is such a skill of a striker. A lot of guys don't do that, so that's why it's hard to counter him. He has a high guard defense, so you kind of almost have to go towards the body more than going after his head. Some of the best head move in the game. We talk about that matrix move. I mean, it's such a hard target to hit. Plus power. He's more of an Adesanya type striker where it's more about his precision and his accuracy than it is his pure power. Like he knocks you out with clean shots.
The Riddell knockout.
Yeah, it's a clean shot. It's not I have so much crushing power. This is no one can take this. Phenomenal kicks. I mean, his calf kicks, his high kicks. He loves that like Alexander Slamenko spinning attack he throws out there. That spinning wheel kick he landed on Brad Riddell was ridiculous. You get to the clinch. If he gets inside, he can grab the Muay Thai clinch. He can battle with knees. It's funny because we talk about wrestling, and I think Justin Gaethje's wrestling is grossly over it. I think Fiziev's wrestling is underrated. I think he's pretty good both offensive and defensively. I don't expect him to wrestle. He also, I mean, we talk about Justin Gaethje not using wrestling. Fiziev is the same way. But he can catch a submission here and there. This fight is amazing. Like this is as when you make a matchup, and I don't know, when we do our matching guys up, a lot of it has to do with promotion and thinking about the title picture and how you want to market guys like that. At least I do that when I don't know what you're thinking. I try to do that a little bit. But if you just go straight, like what's going to be the most entertaining matchup, what's going to be at the end of the season, it's this matchup. I mean, you can't make a better fight than this. I think Gaethje has the power advantage. I think Fiziev has the speed advantage. As Connor said, precision beats power and timing beats speed. And I think this is a coming up party for Steve, which is why I'm really disappointed in the betting lines, because I thought I was taking an upset, or at least that it would be like a pick 'em. I didn't think I was taking a big favorite, so I think we're gonna have some crazy Justin Gaethje type fight in the first round, where Gaethje's blasting leg kicks and they're throwing out of the pocket and having crazy scrambles, and Gaethje's rocked and he catches Fiziev with something good. But I think eventually Fiziev will take over and he'll put Gaethje out for good. I'll say he knocks out Justin Gaethje in the second round.
Yeah, I was mildly surprised by the line as well, and there hasn't been much disagreement on this card. Has there been any disagreement on this card? Yeah, we disagreed on like one fight, but for the same reasons. And I'll add to all the reasons you gave that at some point Gaethje's chin is going to betray him. I mean, it could have come at any time in the last 5 or 6 years. Yeah, it was not unreasonable to ask after the back-to-back losses to Alvarez and Poirier, is Justin Gaethje's chin gone?
Yeah.
And yeah, Oliveira tapped him out, but Oliveira dropped him first. Chandler hurt him a couple times. Ferguson hurt him some in the first round. I mean, it became an avalanche in the opposite direction by the end of the fight, but the first round was a Justin Gaethje round. Fiziev probably doesn't have the same shot for shot power as Gaethje does. Like Gaethje, you mentioned some of the greatest kicks we've ever seen, like especially the low kicks, but also just huge punching power. He has blasted people. It's been almost a year. He got hurt in that fight. He's been hurt in a lot of his fights. He's taken an incredible amount of artillery on his chin. He's already greatly outperformed what I thought he would do when he got to the UFC. By the time he got out of World Series of Fighting, he was like 15-0 or 16-0, and he was a really exciting acquisition by the UFC. But I said he'll be the kind of guy that picks up a ton of bonuses, but never really threatens to win a title in the UFC. Nobody who has two great fights with Luis Palomino is going to fight for a UFC title. Yeah, like it's just a matter. I figured he was a guy that fought down to his opposition and was going to have wild brawls with everyone, because that's what he had in World Series of Fighting. He had two great fights with Luis Palomino, and he won both by TKO, but he got hurt both times, and it were wild back and forth fights. A top 5 fight lightweight shouldn't have wild back and forth fights with Luis Palomino. He should just plunk him in like one round. Yeah, right. And he's outperformed all that. Like, he's a guy who fights up to his competition as well. But that train's got to, like, that train ride has got to end at some point. Gaethje, it's an old feeling 34, that he finds himself right now. And I agree with you. I think this will be a wild fight for a while, but Fiziev's fresher chin, greater precision, probably greater poise, even over the newly somewhat calmed down Gaethje, is going to end up serving him well here. I think this makes it to the third round, but Fiziev will find that chin, put Gaethje down, and he's not going to get back up. Give me Fiziev by third round knockout. That brings us to the main event of UFC 286, a welterweight title fight between Leon Edwards and Kamaru Usman. Edwards, the 31-year-old Englishman, is 20-3 with 1 no contest overall. He is 12-2 with 1 no contest in the UFC. He is on an 11-fight unbeaten streak since losing to Usman in their first meeting all the way back in December of 2015. That run saw him win 10 fights and fight to 1 no contest against Bilal Muhammad. He, of course, fought most recently at UFC 278 last August, where he took the title from Edwards with a head kick that almost certainly turned defeat into victory for him and changed the entire tenor of his career. He will look to retain that title in their trilogy fight as he takes on the former champ, Usman, 35-year-old Nigerian-born American, training out of Colorado, is 20-2 as a professional mixed martial artist. He is 15-1 since joining the UFC out of the 21st season of The Ultimate Fighter. He won his first 15 fights in a row in the UFC, saw him win the welterweight title, insert himself into the conversation as perhaps the greatest in the history of the division before running into Edwards last August. Now, a half a year removed from that shocking setback, he looks to gain back what I'm sure he thinks is rightfully his. Once again, he is a comfortable favorite to do so. Usman going into this fight is minus 240, Edwards plus 190. For reference, going into their first fight, Usman closed at minus 350, Edwards around plus 300. For those curious at home. So the odds have shifted slightly in the direction of Edwards, but not as much as you might think. Keith, we've been doing this show long enough that we did the preview for their second fight last August. We did the recap afterwards. Obviously, I remember both of us were just buzzing for as late as it was. You know, we couldn't.
No, I was on vacation.
Wait,
we must have did it with somebody else.
I'll have to look back at the recap for that. Maybe like, did I just do it solo with like the gang, or did I pull in somebody? Wow. Okay. For as late as it was, could not wait to get on the stick and just talk about. Yeah, I mean, what a historic moment it was for MMA. It felt like one of the biggest moments I'd seen.
I was at a bar in Williamsburg, Virginia, and the entire bar was like going nuts.
This isn't the one where you ran into Jade Bunk, is it? Like our listener?
No, that was when I was in Hawaii. That was Volkanovski versus Korean Zombie.
Okay, gotcha. So little less surprise in that one.
Yeah, no, but that was actually when I met the horse trainer.
Oh,
and got to see the race horses and stuff. But yeah, this will go down as there's some moment. But anytime you're not watching at home, it's easy to remember where you were. But that said, it's one of those places you're always going to remember where you were when that happened. Yeah. Like I think about things in MMA, and I'm not compared to like big things in the world, but like things at MMA, like I always remember being at my friend's Phil's house when Randy Couture landed that big punch on Tim Sylvia. I think about Chael Sonnen versus Anderson Silva. Anderson Silva's comeback outside of Applebee's in Coventry, Rhode Island. You know, This is right there. You know, one of these. Holy shit! What did we just see?
It really was, and that kind of obscures the fact that we were 60 seconds away from it turning out exactly as you and I had predicted. Competitive fight where Usman probably wins 4 rounds out of 5.
Yeah.
Like, I think that was both of our call on the preview, and we looked smart for 24 minutes. I guess the question is, and I'm going to flip this to you for your take on the fight, but anytime we see a big upset in a title fight, the question immediately afterwards is, if they fought 10 times, how many times is it turning out that way? And was this a replicable path to success? Whether we're talking about Pena versus Nunes or,
Yeah. If Leon Edwards kicks him in the face again, yeah, he'll probably win.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, give me your take on this fight. How different do you feel about it than the first time they fought?
Let me ask you this. Who does the UFC want to win?
Usman.
Yeah, I would say so, but I don't think it's as much as it was in the past. I think they want him to win because of the going from 3 African champions to no African champions. I think getting that back. Edwards doesn't help. I mean, even when everyone wins, he still is not selling himself that much.
Honestly, I mean, his moments on the mic afterwards was pretty good. You know, like it was at least like kind of heartfelt.
Sure.
And memorable, but no, like he's not Gunnar, he's not Bisping. Yeah. But
that's okay. Like it's not for a promotion. You want someone with a little more personality, but it is what it is. Like that's him. Yeah. He's just a great fighter. Like,
and I mean, you asked, I I think the UFC would probably lean Usman, but I don't think they feel super strongly either way. British champions are great for them to have too.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
And being in Britain, I just imagine if, say, I don't know, Edwards won somehow last time, and then this time was Usman was the whole time, and then Edwards kicked him in the head. So say like what we just saw happen last time happened this time in England and the card. Like, could you imagine?
Oh, the place would come unglued.
Yeah, and we already know. Like, I'm as a pro America as it comes. Like, I bleed red, white, and blue. You know, that's me through and through. Even though I married a Canadian.
That's conquest, baby. Foreign aggression.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I like capture the flag. I ran to Canada, grab the flag right back. But I'll say this: like, nobody compares to European crowds. Like the English, the Irish, like those crowds are way better crowds in America. And I've been in some loud arenas. I remember being at Boston when Cavalcante and Shane Burgos were beating the piss out of each other with that kind of Boston, New York rivalry thing going on, and Cater hit that uppercut. I was seeing beer flying all over. I mean, that was incredible. I was in New York with Adesanya and Pereira and the comeback. Like, I've had some big moments, but nothing's like those crowds. They're fantastic.
Yeah, and
I couldn't imagine if Edwards did something like that there. Oh my gosh, it'd be insane. As far as, do you want to go into the XOs, or you want to talk about this a little bit more?
I mean, I'm fine unless you've got any other kind of big picture things you want to talk about.
I feel like this has not been marketed. Now, again, we're taping this just before fight week, and I feel like that a lot of times I feel like, wow, this is not really that marketed. And then fight week comes over, and then I start getting all the texts from my friends and everything. And in this case is a little different because we're coming after John Jones 2 weeks. I get that.
It wasn't a great move. Like, it did this card a disservice. You said it off the top that we're having two pay-per-view cards in 2 weeks and a pretty high level fight night card in between them.
Yeah,
with a title eliminator on it. This fight has had no time to marinate.
No, and honestly, this weekend they're battling against other things. Obviously the NCAA wrestling tournament will be going on. The finals will be going on when this is going on. Is college basketball, right? The first weekend of the college basketball tournament will be not the Sweet 16. No, to get into the Sweet 16 will be going on. So like the round of 32 will be going on. So there's things they're going to be battling against. You got to have the fan that they're just not going to buy two pay-per-views. This is what's going to happen, and they're going. Everyone. I doubt very few people. It's like, all right, I'm ordering one pay-per-view. I'm taking Edwards and Usman, even though it's a great fight, and they're gonna go with the return of John Jones. That's what happened, you know. I also think like Kamaru Usman has not helped it because he did his like Ronda Rousey thing. He did his Connor after his Nate Diaz. Like, we haven't seen him and heard from him. He's been gone. Like, where is he?
Yeah, he's really withdrawn from the spotlight, and Edwards hasn't really stepped any further into the spotlight. Is he any bigger a star now than he was, a year ago?
I mean, the only thing you could say about Leon Edwards is welterweight champion Leon Edwards. That's the only difference, you know. So as far as the X and O's, I'll start with the champion Leon Edwards, which he's well rounded. He's a southpaw who. Like, when you watch Leon Edwards, nothing jumps out to you, but then you watch him fight, and you're like, oh, he's just solid everywhere. He moves well. He does really well. Like, he's very technically sound. Like, his first line of defense, I'll say about Leon Edwards, is just not being there, which is the best side. So footwork. He understands range well. He's an accurate kickboxer. He uses feints well. I mean, he's always good at like setting up feints and drawing attack. And then obviously what we saw his KO win over Usman was set up with a feint and then throw into a spot where his opponent's going to be. Strong head movement. He's a stinging guy. Like, he's going to sting you with his shots. Not like one and done, but and he he's good at setting up his entries with his wrestling. Now he got out wrestled for Usman for long periods of time, but he officially got to take that on Kamaru Usman, the first guy in history, though. And anybody who's ever watched wrestling would know that Colby Covington did get a takedown against him. But regardless, he showed like one question, like, oh, he's a very good wrestler. But like, well, who's he wrestled? You know what I mean? Like, he hasn't gone against a strong, powerful NCAA wrestler. But that's not the case anymore. He took down Kamaru Usman. He's a very big guy. Like, there's not many guys that can, match Usman's muscle in the clinch. Now, again, I still favor Usman there, and we saw big portions of that. But just to have moments of success in the clinch against Kamaru Usman is a good accomplishment. If he gets on top, good ground and pound, good top control, strong cardio. Like even I mean, we talk about it as like this Hail Mary, perfectly timed, whatever you want. I don't want to say Hail Mary because it was obviously skillful. It wasn't luck. I didn't mean like that, but I mean like it got to the point where he had to start swinging for the fences. He had to go big. But to go against Kamaru Usman and to be wrestled as much as you were, be late in the fight, 24 minutes, 25 minutes in, and to still muster up something enough to set up that, to be in that moment where you can understand what's going on, see the feints, have the cardio to still muster up that much power. Like, that's something that was not talked about. Is like, that's a cardio thing too. Well, yeah, it wasn't the most barn burner fight, but we know how wrestling, grinding, how much that takes out. It's not the most exciting thing, but it takes something out. So, and one thing, he was losing that fight, but he was never like really hurt. Like, one thing we talked about, like Nate Diaz buckled Leon Edwards and almost took him out. Like, it was like, wow, what happens when he goes to get someone who Usman can crack? I mean, Colby Covington doesn't give compliments to anybody, and like that moment where it settles down for a second, he's not in character. You talked about how hard Kamaru Usman hits, and he was a little gun shy in the second round, and we didn't have that with Edwards. He was never rocked. Now move over to Usman. It's tough to change my notes from the last time because like I still feel the same exact way about him as I did the last time. I felt like he was a really incredible fighter who zigged when he should have zagged. Like, that shit happens. He's a huge welterweight who's like deceivingly long. They've talked about how long his arms are, and he moves well. He's got good cardio, good output. He's very physically strong. He's a guy who gets stronger as the fight goes on. We saw that in this fight in the first time with the first championship fight. I know they fought like forever ago, but he was getting stronger as the rounds went. He was pulling, like, the first round was close, and then he got a little edge in the second round, and the third round he got a big edge. Fourth round he's really pulling away. Fifth round it's like, oh my god, what another performance from Kamaru Usman. We're matchmaking who's going to fight next. Is it going to be Chimaev, or we're trying to figure out what's going on with him. He uses his long arms really well to keep his opponents at the end of the strikes. He's really developed a very good jab. His straight right is good. He's got these power shots that he does really good at wraparound defenses. I like that he targets the body. He's really good at following his strikes, his long-range strikes, like a kick up the middle to follow in to get to that mid-range where he really likes to unload. As he has power, he's knocked out Colby Covington. He's knocked out Gilbert Burns. He knocked Masvidal. Say what you want about that knockout of Masvidal, like, it changed his career so far. Where he was, the guy that was considered one of the best boxers, to suddenly he's a completely different person. Ton of teep kicks. He's had moments, like, other than this knockout. Gilbert Burns hurt him, Colby Covington, but he found moments to dig deep and gather on. And then obviously his bread and butter is his extremely strong grappling department. I always go back to like when RDA had him in a Kimura and he just lifted him up and got out, which is insane. He doesn't shoot. He's definitely like a more he reminds me of a Greco-Roman, or not a Greco-Roman, like a heavyweight wrestler, the way he wrestles, like a good one, but snatch singles and using his legs. And now he can shoot and he can drive his hips, but a lot of times it's just to get a guy up get his leg up, push him against the cage, have him balance for a little bit, wear him then, get chest to chest, wear him then, eventually drop down to the hips. And he likes that grimy, wear you out kind of thing. I mean, when he's chest to chest and you're pressed against the cage, I mean, it is one of the most dominant positions for something that doesn't seem like it's going on, but that's exactly where he wants to be, and he's winning it. He's kicking your leg, he's kneeing your leg, he's battering your ribs, he's annoying you, hitting you with the shoulder, then he drops you down. I mean, you saw what he did, like Tyron Woodley in that position, RDA in that position. He's got a strong mindset where he gets a position, gets him down, holds him down, makes you work. If you're trying to get up, he's grabbing your wrist, he's twisting it, he's making you work every little ounce of energy to get back to your feet. And he understands that you're getting frustrated, he's getting stronger, he's staying on top like glue. And then he's got the cardio. Like, a lot of guys want to fight that way. Kamaru Usman has that cardio. Now, as far as the prediction goes, in a weird sense, even though he got knocked out by Leon Edwards, I feel almost more confident picking Kamaru Usman this time than I did the first time. And I was very confident taking him the first time. And the reason why I'm saying that is, the first fight with Leon Edwards and Kamaru Usman, you couldn't count that at all. Like, you couldn't analyze that at all coming into the second fight. This one you can. So we knew that Leon Edwards made huge improvements over the years, but it was like, how is he going to face with Usman? Now I know how it's going to go. And I know Usman's going to win those positions. And give me the guy that won, 21, 22 minutes of a 25-minute fight. I am a little worried that Usman might be gun shy, being that he first time, I mean, it wasn't a TKO. He was out cold, waking up. What the hell happened? Don't know. Didn't know he got kicked in the head. Like,
the photos were alarming of him just like staring up at the lights, just dead to the world. Yeah.
I mean, the last thing he probably remembered was walking to the cage. Like, it might have been, it depends on what he's going to do. Is he going to stand the outside and really avoid? Or maybe because of that, in the fifth round, when he was trying to strike, I think we might get even more of a boring fight where he's closing distance even more and grinding even more, trying to be on top and clinching and wrestling. And I think we're going to have a boring fight. I think Kamaru Usman's it's going to look a lot like the second, third, fourth round of that fight where he's just wearing on Leon Edwards. Give me Kamaru Usman to win a unanimous decision. I think he's going to win all 5 rounds, and he's a champion once again.
Yeah, I mean, in order to win this fight, in order for Edwards to win this fight, as far as I can see, one of two things would have to happen. He would either need to catch lightning in a bottle again, like he did in their most recent meeting, or he had lost all 4 rounds and they were getting more and more lopsided, but he had enough left in the tank, had enough presence of mind to launch a fight-ending technique. And I'm totally with you. It was not a fluke, and it was not a Hail Mary. I mean, it was urgent, but it was something that he had been setting up at several points throughout the fight. Like, he'd given Usman that same look a couple of times, and finally he let the other shoe drop there. I'm not going to say he drew it up that way. Like, nobody goes in to the gym and on the whiteboard they write, I'm going to get my ass kicked for 23 minutes just to make it more dramatic when I head kick him. Like, that's not what people do, but it says a lot that he was able to do that. One of his routes to victory would be to do something like that again. And if he does, he becomes a whole other kind of MMA legend, for one thing. And Usman gets a little bit of like, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me, to take back to the drawing board.
Yeah.
The other way Edwards wins this is if Usman is different.
He could be. They very well could be.
Usman is now 35, and 35 isn't old for welterweight, but he is a guy that visibly, obviously, has an incredible weight cut. It sounds like Hugh.
I met him in person. He's a big dude,
and
big hands, big arm, big everything.
Yeah, and it sounds like hubris now because he lost the fight. But remember that leading into that fight, he was talking about, well, I don't really want to fight a fellow Nigerian, so I might just jump straight up to 205.
Yeah.
And that didn't age well since he got TFO. But in terms of just physical bulk, it wasn't that far out of the It wasn't completely insane. Like he's a huge dude. So
if he fought at 205, he beat the smaller, but it's not like it wouldn't be shocked if he won the title there. I'm not picking it.
No, but there are top 10 light heavyweights in the UFC right now that he beat.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
like even though. Oh, okay, I was gonna say some of this like Volkan Oezdemir. I fear more Volkan Oezdemir.
Yeah, I think he'd get takedowns on him, or I think he could just jab him to death. I mean, I bet his reach is longer than Oezdemir's.
It might be.
Yeah. Anyway, at 35, with a obviously precarious weight cut, and who knows how he will have responded to this loss psychologically. There's a possibility that he's like, I'm going to do this again, only harder, and I'm not going to make that one mistake.
Could
be. There's all the kind of other dreams I had are out the window, and I'm not fully checked in here. And him becoming a semi-recluse over the last 7 or 8 months, it's either really encouraging or really discouraging, and we don't know which it is until he shows up in England this week, and we kind of get.
Are you worried about his chin at all?
I'm not terribly worried about his chin. It is possible that somebody's chin can just break once, but
I'm not either.
I'm not terribly worried about that. So if it's not that, if Usman isn't badly compromised, then what's Edwards got? He either has to hope for another just incredible split second of offense, or he has to stop Usman from doing what he was doing quite successfully in that fight. Because I doubt Usman's overall game plan has changed much. His game plan doesn't change much for anybody. He's the ultimate impose my will fighter. What he's going to do, and he'll make slight adjustments based on your style, but the basic tool set is always the same. I think Usman beats Edwards worse than he was beating him last time without the shocking reversal of fortune at the end. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say,
I'm going to ask you a question afterwards.
I'm not picking the finish. Edwards is incredibly defensively sound.
Yeah.
And while he was losing the fight, he was making Usman work for everything. Like the wheels had not fallen off his wagon. But give me Usman in a pretty dominant decision here.
Let me ask you this. We keep talking about the changes Usman has to make. What if Edwards is going back to the drawing board and he's the guy saying, yeah, I might have landed this high kick, but I'm the one who needs to change my strategy. And we see a completely different strategy from Leon Edwards. Maybe he goes, yeah, I had huge portions against the cage where I'm losing. And he's like, the outside of the cage, like the kids play, the floor is lava, and he's coming out. He's picking up the output. He's throwing more shots. He's throwing more kicks. He's really stressing a heavy kickboxing game. Maybe we see a completely different Leon Edwards instead of a different Kamaru Usman. Who knows?
I would be fantastic. I'd love to see it, just because otherwise, like you said, I think we're in for not the most exciting fight, and we're going to have one hell of a frustrated London crowd.
Yeah.
But if he comes out and all of a sudden he's like Rocky the second time he fought Creed, and he's like all lighter and leaner and faster and using all his footwork, and if that's what we get, I'm always interested to see how Kamaru Usman and Trevor Whitman deal with different looks that they get. I'd love to see it, but it would still require him to prevent Usman from doing the things he does for at least 3 out of 5 rounds. And
it's a hell of
an ask.
Yeah.
I mean, Edwards already has good footwork and good reach, but it's really, really difficult to stop a good fighter from just getting his hands on you and physically clinching with you that wants to.
Yeah.
Especially if he has long arms and he's super strong.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
And Usman is like the only guy Edwards has ever fought that's like physically stronger than him.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And it's still like kind of close because normally Edwards is the bully. Like as long ago as like 2018, I was like, I think Leon Edwards is the best British MMA wrestler there is right now.
Oh yeah.
I thought it after he was just mauled RDA because I was there for that one.
It might be Mokaev now, but yeah.
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 He's a Dagestani. It doesn't, but
yeah.
But anyway, if he comes out
right now, sorry to interrupt you. Right now, there's some Scottish person like, oh wait, he's Dagestani, but Casey O'Neill's Australian. What is it?
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to see a surprise in this fight, whether it's another shocking finish or just a completely different look from one or both of these fighters. But I can't imagine Usman saying that anything other than I just need to do what I did last time, just a little better.
Yeah.
And Edwards saying, well, I need to set up as many opportunities as possible to get in a moment of offense like that earlier than 24 minutes into the fight.
Yeah.
You know, if Edwards has scared Usman with some moments of offense within the first couple rounds, all of a sudden it's a more interesting fight.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah.
I'm actually excited now. Even though I picked it to be boring.
Yeah.
I picked it to be boring. I'm pretty excited now.
I'm excited. I use the word boring in a very relative sense.
Yeah, of course.
Like I will take a tense fight between two of the best in the world over a slobber knocker between two heavyweights that are gassed after 5 minutes, but you know they're fighting for 10 more because they're too tired to finish each other.
Yeah, same. The boring parts in MMA is still more exciting than the most exciting moment in golf. like golf, the Masters or the golf, whatever this championship, and there's some big, the putt on the 17th hole or something like. Boring clinch battles is still more exciting than that.
Yeah, and I expect we'll get a lot of them tonight. Any other thoughts on this one?
No.
All right, that has been the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC 286. Edwards versus Usman 3. I have been Ben Duffy. He has been Keith Schillen. If this is your first time listening to one of our previews, first of all, thank you. We hope you enjoyed it. We do our best to bring a mix of actual analysis and the occasional story time or comedy time. But please do like, subscribe, leave us a comment. Keith and I both man the comment section on the YouTube page, and we're definitely happy to hear from you. If you think any of these picks are completely wild or you have a huge upset pick of your own, make your voice heard. But most importantly, join us on the recap. We are live on the Sherdog YouTube page, usually about 10 minutes after the main event, where Keith will take the captain's chair. We will cover all these fights in reverse order. We will start from the main event, go all the way down to that women's flyweight opener, talking about what was good, what was bad, what was surprising, what was controversial. There's always something. And the live chat on the YouTube page is open that whole time. So we are taking your questions, your comments, and your hot takes in real time, answering them on the air. We have a growing community of friends that come and hang out with us after the fights, and we would love for you to join them. In between now and then, thank you once again for listening.
Hold on. First of all, thank you for listening. Make sure you hit like, subscribe, do all that good stuff that all the other podcasts beg to do. We never do. But please help us out. That helps out. But by special request, me and Ben will be doing a preview show for the NCAA wrestling tournament where we're going to purposely put on an MMA spin on it, being that we know this is the Sherdog YouTube. And so people want an MMA MMA and wrestling mixed together. So make sure you check out that. It's going to be coming out this week before the NCAA tournament.
Yep. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week and enjoy the fights.